We're on, and if I could have your attention, we've got quite an agenda ahead of us tonight. This is a workshop. We have no desire, our intent is not to be taking votes at the end of this, but we do want to hear from the public. We'd like to try to hold the public comment to the first 20 to 30 minutes. Then I'm going to ask the ad hoc library committee to state or give us an overview of what they think went right and wrong, the capital campaign committee, and then the library committee, and then we will sort of devolve into our own discussion. We may have questions of specific people or committees as we go toward the end. But with that said, this is now a public comment period. Please keep your comments brief, and if you're saying something that others are saying, just please be aware of that if somebody else has already said the same thing, briefing it up even a little more, if you would, please. So, with that...
Briefing.
What?
Briefing?
Briefing it up. It's a new word. That's the beauty of the English language. You can create anything out of anything, So, who would like to start? David. And if you would, please come up to the podium. If you'd like to get in line, that would be fine too. It's as much because the people at home aren't really able to hear you when you're sitting there and speaking from your chairs. So.
Well, good evening. Dave Jackson, resident of West Street for the past 30 years. And I serve on the Opera House Committee, the Parks Committee, and Legacy Rockport, so I'm sort of involved in Rockport affairs. I am taking you at your word that this is about process and not about issues, so I have prepared my remarks regarding the process from here. So, and I'm going to read them because I want to be brief. We should not be discouraged that the first proposal to build a new library failed at the polls. That often happens when a town is seeking to build a new school or a library. In fact, in 1989, even a proposal to renovate this building, the Rockport Opera House, failed at the polls the first time it was presented. And I'm glad to see Bob Duke here because I was the chairman of the Opera House Committee at the time. I went back and talked to Bob, who was chairman of the Select Board Committee at the time. He came up with a new plan, and we went back to, hear it all right? Oh, you can't hear it all right. Yep. Went back to the voters 6 months later, and it passed by a margin of 2-3. So that it can be done if you rethink what you've offered. The important step to take now is to assess why people voted against the library. We can certainly guess many of the reasons. Some people don't think we need our own library. There are people out there that think that. Others think the temporary quarters are fine. Still others think it's too big, and some think it's too small, and some think it's too expensive. Some don't like the design. And there are those who think it's in the wrong place. The important thing is to quantify those objections. We want to see if there's a consensus around any one of them. That would guide us with information we need to move forward. A survey mailed to every household in Rockport would be the best way to get a valid response. It doesn't need to take a very long time to conduct the survey. We must build a library that's at least good for at least 50, maybe 100 years. Let's not rush into it. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is John Sherman. Judy and I have lived on Spring Mountain Drive in West Rockport for 27 years, and we've been frequent users of the library in its current location. This is a joint statement from Judy and I. We voted no on the recent ballot because the current library site was the only option was offered. We feel that the site has several drawbacks, like inadequate parking, congested traffic, difficult topography, environmental problems, all of which is going to make a very expensive project. And we feel that with the coming middle school project and the Votech school project that are going to impact our tax rate substantially, the effect on the taxpayers should be kept to a minimum for the library. The RAS site presents a much more practical option as far as we're concerned, considering it's a level site, plenty of parking, easy access for all users, including those handicapped, and it's already owned by the town. A more simple building can be done initially there with provision for the future expansion. So it seems to us to make sense to go back and consider the RAS site once again. We know that it's been turned down on a couple occasions, but I think it hasn't been turned down with the knowledge that we had at the time when it was voted. So I think, the Rockport Select Board has an obligation to represent the citizens of all the town, not just those in the village. So we hope you will respect those of us who live 2 miles away. Thank you.
Hi, it's Brooke Kehoe, Mystic Avenue. This was the hardest thing I had to vote on this year. It's one of those questions like when you're a kid and your teacher says if there's one you don't get, come back to it at the end when you finish everything. I was debating this question for 4 months, and then I get into the ballot box and I still didn't know my answer. In the end, I did have to answer everything else first and go back. In the end, I voted yes. I voted yes, not because of love, not because I loved the new design, not because I loved the size, but I voted on it because Rockport needs a safe, healthy building. We need I really would like to see our library on the land that Mrs. Bach gave to the town. So there were things I didn't love, but in the end, I voted yes, but also out of fear. Fear because I really didn't want to be here tonight having this conversation. I know that there's financial implications with our temporary location that are pretty big and scary, and so that played a role in my decision as well. What I've learned from this process is that when everyone compromises, no one wins. And that's what I feel as though is what happened with the design we were asked on question 4. It wasn't small, it wasn't huge, it was kind of in between. It was on a location that many people supported, but it wasn't really what those people really wanted. And it just seemed like we were trying to make everyone happy. And in the end, no one was really happy. I mean, I wasn't hearing anyone say, oh, I'm so excited. I love this design. Whereas here we've had a library, our old dilapidated one across the street, that people loved. And that's what I really feel was kind of missing. And I know you say, how on earth do we put love into a library building design? But there has to be something that sparks people into getting excited about it, and I really wasn't seeing that excitement. There was so much good that came from the ad hoc committee's work, and I just thank John Schultz so much for his work in helping the town get into that process. We all learned a lot, and I'm hoping that what the town learned from John Schultz are things we can take into our future plans. I have heard rumors that the select board is considering sending out another survey, and that concerns me for a couple of reasons. One is the fact that I just feel time and time again that the people aren't being listened to, and it's just another delay tactic. I mean, I've heard there's so many voices of what people want in the Rockport Library. Some, I agree, some are just saying the heck with it. Let's be done with it and just go to Camden. I've heard some say fix up the old building and shut up. You know, but the two biggest voices are keep it on One Lime Rock or move it to the school site. And my answer, you know, I can't even contemplate the old school site because I've read Mrs. Bach's deed. To me, the old school site is out of the question. I know some people are fine with ignoring this. But I don't know, as a town, as selectman and town manager, the legal ramifications of ignoring this. And I really feel as though, again, we keep putting the cart before the horse with this library. And if we're going to open up discussion about bringing the library to the RES site, you really need to get a lawyer to look at this. I really don't want to fill out a survey until you guys get a lawyer to look into this. Thank you.
Thank you.
John Alexander, a resident of Rockport for, I guess, 26, 27 years. I really wouldn't like to have your job in trying to make this decision. Sometimes I think about it, it's a bit like I'm going to be living in the land of the living dead. This is a zombie that's going to keep coming back to life with no way we're going to be able to kill it. I voted against it. The reason was that too big, too much money for this small town of, 3,000 people and $4 million seemed like crazy to me. And I have been thinking, well, the library, well, first of all, this year, next year, there's going to be half as many children or babies born in Maine as there are people turning 65. So when we talk about long term, you know, what's down the road? Shrinking population to use libraries, I believe, especially with technology as it develops. And so I have been thinking, why not just leave the library where it is, renovate it, spend the money, renovate it, do what it needs to be done, and integrate, become a satellite with Rockland and Camden. Pay them some money. You don't have to have the full catalogue in this library here. We can function perfectly well using technology and working with the other big libraries that are in this area. So there's an assumption built into all the discussions that I've heard that we have to build a new library, you know, and I think that needs to be seriously challenged. Don't let's spend the money on new buildings and building edifices. Let's spend the money on other things that are going to be arising, like the needs of the elderly in this area, as other social needs. The library well serves, I think, the community that uses it, and not everybody uses the library. So that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Ames Curtis. I live in, I guess what's considered West Rockport. I sent a letter to the select board today and to other members who are on the library committee and the capital campaign committee, which I understand is no longer given the current circumstances. But I just want to repeat a few of the high points from that letter. And I want to also try to make some points that I think are a little different from what we've heard before. I really appreciated your remarks. I don't even know your name, but I understand the difficulty because I too had some difficulty, but I'm a very strong proponent for the RES side. So I'm going to have to, I'll take the opposite side in some ways. And I think most everyone knows that the major reasons, from at least from my perspective, but for many people who support the RES site, are that it is town-owned, and in fact, I don't know that people know that it was a gift to the town. it was deeded to the town, in the same way the Bach land was deeded to the town. And it was deeded by a family who gave it to the town for the betterment of all citizens of Rockport. And I don't know why that doesn't have just as much weight, even though time has passed. I don't know why that doesn't have just as much weight as the Bach. And I also think that had we started from ground zero, let's say, no library in our town, had we started to say we want a library, we're going to build a new library, what's the best location for that library? The first thing we would have done is we would have looked at sites all around town, and we would have had criteria for sites for a library. And under those circumstances, never mind the deeded gifts, under those circumstances, I don't think the current site would have passed in that situation. I believe it's very important to think about our future, not just cling to the past of this beautiful, charming village that we all love and the kind of Currier and Ives image that it presents to the world. But if we really value young people in our community and what the growth of this community can be for the future, and I'm happy to report my daughter Michaela Stone is here as a representative of that, and I think she's the youngest one in the room. Oh, okay, good. I think it's really important for us to be thinking of their needs, that we want a vibrant community. We want one that looks toward a bright future for Rockport and not one that sort of maintains this sort of staid, beautiful place that we have, but that encourages people to come and want to settle here, to be here, to raise their families here. I think the RES site is so important because of its accessibility to all the population. It's not walkable for so many people. It's drivable, I guarantee you, but it's easily drivable because of the major highways. It's safe because of that intersection with the stop lights. And as, I don't know the gentleman who spoke before me, but when he talked about the aging population, and obviously here we are, you know, we need safe parking. We need ample handicap parking spaces. We got to think of that as well. So we've got our young people to look for, we've got our older people to look for. And I don't understand why such a good, open space like the RES site isn't given prime consideration. And I really ask the select board to go back and think of that as a prime alternative. Let's get some cost comparisons. People voted no on that question, which was theoretically non-binding, a non-binding referendum, on the question against the RES site. But they also voted no on question 8, which was, do you want to build a new library? And people voted no. So, hey, if no doesn't stand on 9, why doesn't no not stand on 8? So I really think we need to go back to the drawing board, come up with a design that really is appealing to people. The right size, a New England charm that we all value that's on the current site, the old library, but with all the modern amenities and energy efficiencies that could go into a building of that sort that everyone in this community has access to. Thank you.
I think Mr. Duke was next in line.
I don't need to be.
Oh.
I was just getting near, that's all. Go ahead, sir.
Okay, I'm Mark Van Balen. My wife and I, Louisa, live on Calderwood Lane. We have been coming to Rockport, in my case, for between 40 and 50 years, and in Louisa's case, between 60 and 70 years. However, we just became full-time residents and therefore voting members of the population within the last 3 years. Full disclosure, we voted for the library initiative and were disappointed that it did not pass. And the reason why we were disappointed was our fear is that we are about to engage in another process that will be very time-consuming and will result in increased costs and construction delays and other sorts of things. So since the board has asked us to focus more on process than product, my thoughts are about process. I think the reason why the library referendum went down is the dogs didn't like the dog food. That is, the option presented was, here's what we're going to do, take it or leave it. There were many financial questions about that. The finances were frankly quite murky to me, and it was very difficult to get answers to all of these things. Underlying that concern, I believe there's a serious question of trust in our community, which I would like to address. I think there are large numbers of people who simply don't trust the other guys to do the right thing. If we had a higher level of trust, I believe that we could come together as a community in a more effective way. The process that we've gone through that brought us to the referendum that went down, I found to be, from my standpoint, completely opaque. It was extremely difficult to find out what the heck was going on. One example of that is this meeting here tonight. This meeting here tonight, from my standpoint, was top secret. The only way I even found out about this meeting was I happened to be in the post office sorting my mail at, where you have the table where you put your junk mail in, and I saw there was a little bulletin board there with a notice for this meeting. That was the only way I found out about this meeting. 2 hours ago, I went to the Rockport Library website to find out, has this meeting been announced? Well, guess what? The main event concerning the future of the Rockport Library today was drop-in mahjong. Okay? I think mahjong is great. Drop-in mahjong is great. I clicked on the button that said future planning. I then found that the Ad hoc Library Planning Committee had presented something to somebody on November 5th. That is, this meeting itself was not even mentioned. I then went to the town website saying, does the town website consider this to be an important event? Well, we're all here, so it must be important. Town website, perhaps rightly so. The main thing is there's a special town meeting having to do with solar energy on the 5th of December. Could not find anything about this meeting. So as a voting member, taxpayer, why is it so hard to find out what's going on? So my urge to the Board of Selectmen, the Library Committee, the Library Ad hoc Committee, is to simply increase the communications by an order of magnitude. It's just completely inadequate. So I have all kinds of opinions about the library. We've talked about the site, the construction. I would say that I am deeply devoted to not only the Rockport Library, but to libraries in general, based on my long, extensive, my long career at Harvard University. I've been involved with the university library there. I'm deeply devoted to libraries in general and what they can bring to the community. Libraries are a storehouse of knowledge, okay? And we cannot get by without that, even in the days of Google and Siri. So I think that the way forward is to vastly increase the openness and communication of the process, and I have all kinds of other ideas about the product that I will reserve for a future time. Thank you.
My name is Stephanie Lash. I'm a former member of the Library Committee and have been following this issue for the past 4 years or so. I'm very, very disturbed that we are where we are right now. I did vote for this referendum. I did vote for the proposal that was presented in November. I thought it was too expensive and it's too large by any kind of standard benchmark. It's about 50% bigger than a town this size should be building. But the town has been through so much that I really wanted to see this issue resolved. But I do think it's too large, and I think that that's the reason that it failed. And I think I'd like to speak to 2 points that were made earlier. You know, people complain that the parking isn't good where the present or the old library was, and that it isn't big enough. And so the town has gone to great expense to rent and to move the library into a new place that has big parking and is on Route 1 and is twice the size of the library that is presently at Lime Rock. And if people vote with their feet, then if those really are big issues, then you'd expect that a lot more people would now be going to our rented space. And that has not been the case. So it proves to me that those are really not the most critical issues. I also want to make a comment about the land and the box use of that land. There's a big difference between those two sites in terms of the town, because there are very specific restrictions in terms of how that land can be used that are not present on the RES site. So, well, for many reasons, in terms of retaining a walkable village identity for everybody who lives in Rockport, not just for the people whose homes are there, but for everybody to enjoy walking around our harbor. There are both legal reasons and aesthetic and cultural community reasons to keep that site. I think it would be tragic to reopen this discussion in terms of location. I think that the leaders in this town really need to look at something that's more financially responsible. And yes, I do think that we should do it as quickly and as efficiently as possible. Thank you.
Good evening. Excuse me. Good evening. My name is Bob Duke. I live on Hughes Street. And the first question I have is for the audience. Does everyone here love Rockport? Is there anyone that doesn't love Rockport? The one thing about Rockport, I've grown up here, the one thing about Rockport is we all appreciate each other's opinions. So one of the things that got lost in this dilemma that we have, you either want to be at 1 Lime Rock Street or you want to be at RES. And it's unfortunate because I don't think we're necessarily listening to each other. So that would be my first advice. I'm here to just give advice. I've been sitting at that table, and I've been in the audience a lot, and I think that the first thing we need to do is to listen to each other. I'm not here to talk about location. I'm here to just talk to you as the select board. I served on the select board from 1986 to 1998, I believe it was, and we were involved in one of the biggest projects in town, which was putting sewer in the town of Rockport. If you think the library is difficult, the sewer was really, really bad. I mean, we couldn't get Camden to take our sewer. We couldn't get Rockland to take our sewer. We had to do deals, kind of like Donald Trump in a guessing way. So, bad analogy, I guess. But anyway, we tackled some really tough stuff back then. Yes, we dealt with the Opera House was in rough shape, and through Bay Chamber and a lot of folks outside of Bay Chamber in the town, we got that, spruced up, and here we are today. So my advice to the select board is, and I kind of typed it out and I couldn't print it off, so bear with me for a little bit. First of all, don't overanalyze the vote. Okay, the vote is the vote. It doesn't matter how much it lost by or how much it, whatever happened, it failed. A vote, especially during a presidential election, is a message, though. It's your best survey. So you should pay attention to that. Whatever it is. If it went down in flames, that's the way it is. What was done leading up to the vote didn't work. So whatever that process was, think about that. This town has become a town of many committees. I used to be on that table and make fun of the town of Camden because at the time they had like 32 committees. The town of Rockport is right in second place, and committees are great, but committees got to be able to function, but it ultimately gets back to this table. And you five, I know you're missing one tonight, but you five are really the ones that have to take that and own it, and promote it, quite honestly. So you got to recognize your responsibility to present an acceptable plan to the voters in the future. One of the things that I feel that would be a really good idea as you move this thing through, however you do it, is that you frankly have a whole bunch of big town meetings, and let people just air their opinions. I think do it upstairs, promote it heavily. By the way, I don't believe that this town is that secret because, and I'm not that averse to the town's website, but I wanted to look at the agenda tonight, and I quickly went to calendar, found the meeting tonight and clicked on it, and I realized that we're not talking about location, we're talking about process. So it isn't, I don't think the town's in that bad a shape as you might think. If a committee, number 5, have the collective bravery to develop a plan that you as the town leaders will publicly support. And we made, when we were, again, this goes back 25 years, but when we had to deal with the sewer, and we dealt with Public Works to garage, and we had dealt with the Opera House, we had to make a lot of unpopular decisions. Accept the fact that that's what you have to do, okay? Sometimes you're not gonna make everybody happy out here. I probably guess that half these folks are gonna agree with that site, and the other half is gonna agree with RES site. So realize that you're gonna have difference of opinions, and ultimately, you guys have to present a great plan to get to the voters. If you do end up with another committee, if a committee is empowered to develop a new plan, ensure that you assemble townspeople that have both strong and moderate opinions on both sides, and make sure it's equal. I don't believe that happened this last time. When our selectmen in the I'll just talk about back in the late 80s, and the process to put the sewer in, we had to figure out where the sewer was gonna be around Rockport Harbor and Clam Cove. We didn't employ committees. Quite honestly, we did it without committees. And it was probably the hardest public service thing that I've ever had to do. But what we did is we took the time, and we started, I wanna say it was 87, 88 when we started with that thing. And before, I think it was 1992 or 93 before the vote actually happened. So I know a lot of folks are saying, let's speed it up, let's get it done, let's make it happen. This is an emotional issue, obviously. So I'm going to tell you, take your time and do it right the next time, and don't feel shell-shocked that you got a no vote. Obviously, it came out that way, and honestly, I think it was a great thing that as many people spoke out. You might not agree with the outcome, but that's the way it is. That's my advice from the past, let's put it that way.
Thank you, Bob.
Thanks, we have to go to another meeting.
Hi, Brooke again. I will keep this quick. I felt invited to come up and read Mrs. Bach's deed. I will just read the 2 sentences. So
Let everybody have a chance.
well,
She's on a different topic, though. Yep. But, we have read the deed.
you have read
We
it,
have
and you
copies.
understand that it's different wording than the RES deed.
And we will be dealing with that and the deed at our December 5th meeting.
Okay.
It's coming in under old business, so it'll be right near the beginning of the meeting.
Okay. I just felt compelled
Yeah.
to come up because I thought you implicated that it was the same type of wording.
No, I
No.
knew it was not, but I
Yeah.
just think both benefactors have
Okay.
to be.
Can I interrupt now? I think it's only fair from this point forward that people speak once, and if they want to speak again, it will have to be after everyone else has had a chance, unless the board disagrees.
Hello, my name is John Priestley, and in respect to process, it feels to me like we're in a great place to solicit input from all the voters as to why they either voted for the proposal or against it. It would be, I think, confusing, be difficult to fathom from your position, from the ad hoc library committee's position, to try to figure out what had gone wrong. I appreciated the comment about the dogs not liking the dog food. There could be any number of reasons why this didn't go forward. I feel it's clear that the people in the town want a new library in one form or another, in one place or another. So why was this defeated? So is it a survey? That might be one solution. Is it a public meeting that lasts longer than half an hour, or we're now 35 minutes into public comment? This is something that we could all talk about for hours, and it could include more than this number of people. We could be upstairs and say, this is your opportunity to really air out your views. But I think it's important that you and the library committee hear why people voted the way they did, because otherwise we're going to go around in circles. When I hear people talk about the RES site, I feel like we already covered that ground and the town voted on that. There's a very clear legal reason why, if the town put the library there, this site would be lost. That would be folly for the town to surrender a piece of property that it owns currently. So that, combined with the fact that people seem to prefer it in this location, I think moving forward as part of the process, let's not go over old ground. But addressing that issue for those who feel that the RES site offers something, all I've heard as a positive for that site is that it offers good parking. And I think it's important for everyone to understand that this site, the current library site, inclusive of the park, can accommodate a large number of spaces off-street, probably around 24 spaces on a level path to the library, no hills, no parking on the angle, no crazy parking as it is currently. Eliminating Lime Rock Street, which has been discussed and explored in options so that you could walk from your car through the park, get to the library. It would have parking that was every bit as good as RES and every bit as accommodating and every bit as safe. You just weren't presented that in the scheme that came to you in this vote. So I think it's important for those people who have that in mind to know that can happen. It can happen economically. That's it for me. Thanks.
Thank you. I think we'll take one more comment here.
John Hissong, resident of Rockport all my life. My opinion is the cost of the library, wherever it be here or there, we're talking $4 million. We're talking 2 million contributions. And then we're talking somewhere around 3 times the size of the library now, roughly was proposed. My opinion is if we went somewhere around twice the size of it, 7,500, and you could get that cost down to somewhere around 2 million privately, 1 million on loans or what have you, and then the other on the tax base, we might be looking at something there, because if I understood correctly, we were going to have to take this island out up here for parking, and that was going to be another $400,000. So I just think the cost was too much, is what this other lady said. So.
Okay. Thank you. So we're now going to. Are we good with one more?
Sure.
Okay.
We should let him go until.
Chris Sadie, Rockport resident, frequent library user, and also want to consider both the elderly and the grandchildren as well, that are going to be our future users. With cost such a concern, I really want you to consider that if we had a plan for RES, people could compare both. And I know cost is a concern for most of the people, and as Bob Duke said, probably half the people in this room would like you to consider that other option. So as you're considering your process, and you do need to hear from people, not just through some sort of town meeting, but probably some sort of survey, so those who can't come out have a chance. Think of different ways that you can hear from people. And the holiday season's coming, so getting out's going to be difficult as well. So take your time. Maybe it's going to be in January or whatever, but you do need to hear from people beyond this night. So do a process that's going to work. Take your time. But if cost is the major concern, it's one of those concerns. You have this other site. I do think parking is a concern, and that's really what I wanted to say. I think this issue of the parking at the Lime Rock site is a concern for the elderly and for the children and really everyone who's going to come in the building. And I'd like to see some sort of a drawing, maybe not to the depth of detail of the one at One Lime Rock, but some sort of a drawing that we could get some cost numbers and we could see what we could get comparable size. What could we get? Would it cost $4 million? And let's see. I think that's what the voters want to see. What can we get for our money at that site? Thank you.
Yep. We good with John?
Unless anybody else has had this. Does anybody else want to speak?
I'll be very brief.
Yeah.
Brief.
Yes, yeah. I just want to talk about the process and what would satisfy me, and I hope many other people, would be to develop as many plans as possible. You know, where it is, you know, I don't want to go back to the RES, but if it is on that site, where it is on the RES, twice the size of what it is, the current proposal, alternatives using technology, connecting with Rockland and Camden. Develop all of those proposals and any others that may seem ridiculous. And then have a meeting, put them all around the wall, let people see what's there, and have that time, take that time over the course of a week if need be, and let's discuss them all. And then following that, get people's feedback, and then you guys make a decision.
Just have one thing to say. I'm Barb Jackson, Central Street, Rockport. I haven't heard a lot of discussion about purchasing the property that is probably available right behind the library for parking. That way we wouldn't have to destroy our beautiful park across the street, and no one would have to cross the street. So let's, look into that. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have anyone else before we move?
Sorry. I'm Jonathan Potter, live on Pine Street. There have been several issues raised about size. If you go to the building where the library is currently located, you will see a sign which indicates the size of that building versus the size of the former library. That building is much larger, and it has some difficulties that are important to think about. I belong to 3 different areas of interest in that library. One is a poetry group, a writers group, and a readers group. And there's one room, the Marine Room, which had to be renovated, pulled a lot of shelving pulled out in order to allow a meeting of a group of people interested in talking about words and books. Thank you.
Anyone else? Then I'm going to ask the Ad hoc Library Planning Committee if they would give us their brief rundown of the process and where we should go.
I had thought there was going to be an hour of public speaking. I'm perfectly willing to give up the next 15 minutes of my talk if anybody would like to continue this. I think it's very important for the town. I'll introduce myself. I'm Jan Rosenbaum. I was chair of the Ad hoc Library Committee and the steering committee before that. So I have been the face of the library, other than Ben, for a long time. I'm going to ask you to hold your applause at the end because that way I won't be disappointed when there isn't any. I'm going to read this. It's a combination of the report from the Ad hoc Committee and some thoughts on my own of watching this for the last 5 years. Summary, what we did right, what mattered. Transparency, communication, clarity of overall process steps. Mandates, that is, in order to be on the committee, you had to agree to the site and the size of the program. Mandates met ahead of schedule. What we did wrong, what mattered most. Failure to light a fire, failure to arrive at an agreement across the town by a wide enough margin to promote fundraising efforts. This is one of those situations where the operation was a success in spite of the patient dying. The Ad hoc Committee completed its Select Board and Library Committee mandate, site and programming space, once Reed and Company presented the final concept drawings and cost estimates in August. There were still cost questions from the public, but no additional building, efficiency, or maintenance estimates could be made until specialists were hired, the usual point of stoppage before serious amounts of money have to be spent through the architects. Rather than dissolve at that point, we were expected to lead the election effort without budget, direction, or advice. We had the help of a few amazingly dedicated individuals from each of the relevant groups: the Ad hoc Library Planning Committee, the Library Committee, the Friends Committee, the Capital Campaign Committee, and the Select Board, but not much physical help overall, publicly or privately, from the various committees or groups that should have had a vested interest in the election result. The Friends generously provided the budget for our efforts when no one else came forward. Based on my experience and my observations of other ad hoc committee members, a lot of energy was expended in a very tight time frame on our major efforts, that of choosing and then working with architects and site designer to meet our responsibilities with the best design we could. Once that was accomplished, all the adrenaline left the room, energy levels dropped, we all became less available for a variety of reasons, often work-related, but also, at least for me, various degrees of burnout. By the last few scheduled meetings, we could not assemble a quorum. A request last week to the committee members for comments for this report was answered by just one member. Recommendations for the future. This is not easy. I see 5 reasons and many combinations for the lack of a single solution that can gather significant majority in agreement. Cost, no matter how paid for. 2, rising property taxes, especially hurt by the state government's elimination of burden sharing with towns and failure to comply with the voters' mandate for 50% education funding. 3, amount and kind of proposed space and therefore overall building size. 4, design of the proposed building, even with several good faith iterations. 5, site of the proposed library. I do not think that we, the various committees and groups working for the last few years, have failed to listen. Over the years, we have run a survey, held 5 moderated listening tours, held a half-dozen focus groups, held several open meetings in the Opera House and other town locations, had an FAQ page on the library website, contributed and read letters to the editor of the local papers and news sites, held public committee meetings and public interviews with 6 architectural firms, most live-streamed and archived. My home phone and email have been widely distributed. All documents, plans, and meeting minutes are posted on the library's website. We man tables at library and other town events in town. We sent out mailers and press releases. We knocked on doors. We held information events that were poorly attended or simply unattended. If anyone didn't know what we were doing, he or she wasn't making even a half-hearted effort to find out. I don't think that lack of information was the problem. We have asked and we have been told. Factions abound. We do not agree on a single point. Not that we need a new library, that we need a library at all, let alone that we need a library that can offer more to the community than the 1997 addition to the Lime Rock Street white clapboard building. Or maybe we do, but it belongs somewhere else. We splinter. Nothing is unanimous. Nothing is going to be unanimous. And in the new spirit of America, we each say, my way or the highway. From my current point of view, face down on the tarmac, I cannot see a way to move directly forward on a solution. It may exist, but it eludes me. We do not need to ask the residents anything else. They have spoken distinctly and inconclusively. There is no magic survey question, no funding compromise, no undiscovered site, no building that is larger inside than it is outside that we will mutually agree upon. We cannot, should not, succumb to a comfortable fairy tale past, a 50-year accretion of lowest bidder, poorly built, poorly designed parts. Retreating by spending money on the old building will kill our community's spirit to look ahead. We apparently can't blend the future with the past. They don't look right together to anyone. We shouldn't, my opinion, try to build a brand new 19th century building. Even done well, it will look like Macy's Christmas window, a cliched attempt to recreate a fake past. We shouldn't think of developing the RES site without a new town-wide comprehensive plan. Ours is several years overdue and no longer addresses our situation or represents our view of the future. That prominent and irreplaceable 7-acre site deserves thought, wide, deep conversation, and professional advice. The powers that be need to act like powers. The Select Board, the Planning Board, the Town Manager, and professional urban planners should be joined by the Library, Parks, Recreation, Harbor, and other committees and citizens, both relatively new and those with deep histories in Rockport, to invent and write a new comprehensive plan. Be proactive. Recognize your responsibilities for the direction of the town's future and the library's place in it. We need a town vision to gather around and an accepted path into the next generation. A new library will fall directly, logically, organically, and peacefully out of that process. Submitted by and representing only the view of Jan Rosenbaum. Thank you.
Do we have any questions that we want to ask of Jan specifically? No? All right. I've also asked the Capital Campaign Committee if they would like to make a presentation at this time.
Well, I wouldn't call it a presentation, but
Speak to us.
I just wanted to speak on behalf of my colleagues, just a reality check about where we are and what expectations may or may not be there. We really have disbanded. I mean, we are not proceeding. There's no assurance that our group would start again. We supported the compromise plan and worked hard. Several of us went door to door. We felt that that was a good path forward. But there are no guarantees that you should be thinking about that this group would be willing to start again. That said, we're a group of individuals. We're watching. We're very invested in having a new library for Rockport. So if and when that emerges, then we'll see what happens. But I want to be really clear that as a group, we're not engaging anymore. But I would like to just give a little review of what we have done. And the group has been working since last winter, but I would say since summer. I'm not exactly sure when, but we started meeting every other week. We spoke with numerous fundraising professionals, seeking ideas and recommendations for a campaign. Several of us have worked on capital campaigns before, but having it be a part of a municipality was a little different. I certainly have worked on campaigns, but they've been for private nonprofits. So we talked with a lot of people. We also interviewed 4 potential capital campaign consultants who submitted proposals to us with the understanding that when the bond passed, we wanted to hit the ground running, when it passed. That was our planning, that was our expectation. We talked with several libraries around the state, and I would say someone had mentioned just because it fails the first time doesn't mean that we should stop, because evidently that's pretty common around the state where libraries have not succeeded the first time. They've been amended, they've been thought about, just as the process is here, and then have been successful after that. We built a database of possible donors at all levels. We secured 2 leadership gifts, but I would also say that all of that is confidential, especially the private conversations that we had with people, and something that we would not be able or privileged to really talk about publicly. We spoke with many people that we felt might support the campaign. And had, really interesting conversations about their thinking, people's thinking about the campaign, about the library. We developed a case statement, and we advertised and received approximately for 25 applications for a part-time project manager that we would have been hiring to help us really administer the campaign when the bond had passed. So I would just say, I believe I can speak for all of us saying we really believe a library for Rockport is important, but as a group, we're no longer functioning as a group. So Yeah. Any questions or?
Yeah. Can you describe when, or perhaps in comparison to this last effort, when is the right time to convene the capital campaign committee, understanding that you're not going to kick into full gear until after you have an approved bond?
Well, I think you have to have a real plan, which we had. You have to have something that you can talk about, that you can talk to potential donors about. Many capital campaigns include a feasibility study. In a way, we did kind of informal one. What do you think about this plan? Give us your input. Trying to ascertain what kind of support would be available for that plan. So I think it's really important that you have to have a concrete proposal to take to potential donors before you can really start forming a campaign.
To build on that a little bit, since your group really represented half of the cost of the library, and were willing to take on that proposal, that commitment, is there any missteps that we would take that would make a reconvened or a new capital committee's job significantly harder?
I'm not exactly sure what you're asking.
We could.
I think in hindsight, I think we didn't coordinate a good enough campaign for the vote. I mean, there were some really good mailings. I think Jan did a good job kind of explaining. The ad hoc committee was tired, and to expect them to be the driver of the campaign for the vote, I think they did an amazing job, and especially Jan, thank you, getting mailers out, trying to promote the idea. I think a more organized and more energetic campaign from the select board, from all the groups that were working perhaps in a more coordinated way may have helped. I don't know. But I think one thing in my thinking is almost 50%, minus 9 people, voted for this project, and for varieties of reasons. I appreciated hearing not everybody thought it was perfect. I didn't think it was perfect, and that's actually why I felt supportive of it, because I felt it was a good compromise. But to me, the no's were extremely varied. So I think there was consensus in a very large sense for the yes, because it wasn't perfect, but it was a compromise. The reasons for the no's were very diverse. But I also think in order to really raise money for a capital campaign, I think we need more energy for it. We need more than just 50% plus or minus. I think somehow finding some energy from the community that they do want a new library, and this is the best idea for a new library, would be important for raising significant money. I don't know what that looks like, but finding some way of building more collaboration and more community support for it, aside from select board and people who are invested.
Among the people that you talked to, how was the level of support there? I mean, you must have talked to some people who said, I don't like the plan and I'm not going to support it or whatever.
Yeah, very much so, yeah.
How, was the percentage similar to how the vote went among the people you spoke with?
I would say so, probably, although I probably may a few more were for it. But one older woman had already voted for it. I did some door knocking, and she said, I voted against it because of parking. And I explained to her that there were some additional parking places and that she didn't really understand that. But that was her main reason, because she's elderly. Another person thought that we had already voted no on the RES site and thought that was a done deal. And that, and she wanted the RES site, not the, and then others thought it was too expensive. I mean, the same things we've heard here, I think.
So you didn't find anything terribly different than the
No.
result of the vote? Okay, that's all I wanted to know.
I wish you luck.
Thank you, Joan. Bill?
Are we good? We good with?
Yeah.
More
Come on, Bill.
the merrier.
Yeah.
My name is Bill Froelich, and I live on Russell Avenue, and we've owned the house for over 20 years. I have a sense that what is needed is more than 5 or 10 votes in one direction or another. And I also have a sense that the way to get 3/4 or whatever of the voters to favor a proposal is to think more about compromise. My sense is still, with the committees that exist, including the Library Committee, I find a great deal of rigidity and an unwillingness to think about smaller. Now, I know that a proposal for 6,000 or so feet was made to the Library Committee by one of its members, and it was rejected by the Library Committee. I think it's really important to get the people who believe in building a new library, but believe that, contrary to any of the statistics that were brought forth about how many people entered the library on Tuesday or whenever, that the tendency with libraries relative to population is to have a much smaller library for a population of roughly 3,000 people. And that it would be a wonderful thing if we could really bring different groups together to talk about what would produce more votes for the new library. I happen to think, having talked to and heard from a number of people, that a smaller library in the range of 6,000 to 7,000 square feet would produce much more support than what exists and existed for the 9,300 square foot library. I also think that we should be thinking about dollars and cents. I have not heard anyone on the select board or any of the committees saying, well, what this town can really afford is $2 million, $2.5 million total. Somehow or other, the dollar amount came out very late, the $4.5 million. And I think we have to think about money in a different way than the Library Committee does and some of the other committees. And I would seriously urge the Select Board to take a leadership role in bringing together different groups within the town to try to forge a proposal for a library that would produce a strong, positive vote from the population. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. Okay, at this point, we were going to hear from the Library Committee, and there she is.
Hi, good evening. My name's Ann Philly. I'm the chair of the Library Committee. We're a 4-member committee right now, usually 5. And I appreciate your time, appreciate everybody coming out. And I do have some things that I'd like to read. But I first of all just wanted to say thank you so much to the Ad Hoc Library Committee for all their work. Thank you for those people who have spoken on behalf of the library in whatever capacity you feel. I think we're going to probably continue to have a lot more discussion, as we can see. And, you know, thank you to the Select Board to continue to even want to hear from us. So Thank you. As current chair of the library committee, I can say that our members are united in the support of a new library building. And in that effort, one of the things I wanted to mention here tonight, and this is just on me, is that I feel that one of the things that perhaps we should have done from the get-go is to remove the old library building. It was deemed unsafe. We moved people out. We moved people and employees and people coming to see the library because in July of 2015, the town manager reported that the current library has no value left and makes no sense to repair it. The select board determined that the building is not suitable for expansion based on the engineering study. So my question is really to you. One of the things that you should think about is tearing it down. We need to have a fresh start. The other thing I wanted to say is that I think it must also be stated that most people who live in Rockport really don't want to be Camden Light. We're sharing things, police, the town assessor, but why do we want to pay taxes for a library that has less to offer and not more to offer? I think those are important things that we have to keep in mind. We've talked or heard people talking about the fact that less people need a library, but on average, that library gets about 30,000 people a year. That's yes, it is true. That's quite a lot of people that come in and use that library. People coming in time after time, people that come here to visit, who want to see a library when they're here on their summer vacation, businesses. There's a whole wide variety, and I'm not going to get into that. I'm not making up my statistics. Thank you very much. So in terms of what's been done previous to this, I think there's been a lot of work done by people who've been on the library committee in the past. You were brought a recommendation by the previous members of the library committee. You accepted that proposal. You then also accepted the work that was done by the ad hoc library committee and went with an idea. One of the things that I was very heartened to hear by several people tonight is that, we need to kind of get more people involved in working together, getting more groups together from all various factions, and also to think about what is going to be best for Rockport now and going into the future, and what kind of plan can we create. I loved what Jan said about, we really need to have a comprehensive development plan. If a library can be an anchor, wherever it ends up being, I think it's an important one. If you think about education and broadening access to information and communication and what a library can bring to people and to towns, just think for a minute, if we give up that right to have a public library in our town, I think then you will really start to see people's property values going down. If they're not already doing it now because of other things, you take a nice community library and take it out of your town, and things are going to start going downhill pretty fast. So I think you have to kind of keep those in mind. But I think bringing more people into the discussion is important. And the library committee, we're fairly newly formed. Maybe people felt that we should have done more. I knocked on doors, I wrote letters. Not everything got into the newspaper. There were a lot of letters going in the newspaper, and shucks, mine got missed. But, I sent it out in a lot of different ways. The library committee is committed to helping the process along because we do want a library that's going to be the best for our community. And, I'm heartened by the fact that we have a great group of people on that committee now that are focused on really making sure to work together. We'll work with whatever committees come available. We'd be happy to begin an annual request for donations, and if it's for a new library, we're happy to do that. So there are a lot of ways that we can help and support the process. So thank you for letting me ramble on. I appreciate your the fact that you've been giving a lot of information tonight, and I know there are a lot of decisions that have to be made. So thank you for everyone for your time. Appreciate it.
So I want to say that went much faster than I thought it was going to from everyone. Bravo and thank you.
Sure.
Paul is a member of the library committee. So.
Yes, thank you. I wish I could be happier tonight. I really do. I'm really approaching this with a great deal of heartfelt sadness. It's been going on since 2011. I don't want to go over the whole history, but it started with a $10,000 grant from the Davis Foundation that was spent on a architectural design for 14,000-foot library at the RES site. It was also spent on surveys and focus groups. And the results from those surveys and focus groups was very little interest in a new library. Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, so that represented, in my mind, $10,000 down the drain. Since then, a lot of other things have happened, and I'm not going to quarrel with those. But I think we're at a point now where I want to see a new, larger library in Rockport. I'd love to see it at 1 Lime Rock Street. And I think the path forward, as Bill Froelich so eloquently and clearly stated, is we need something bigger than what we've got, but maybe not as big as what has been advocated. Because we are a community, a rural community of 3,300 people. We are not an affluent community. Our general assistance fund, if I'm not mistaken, is $26,000, and it was all spent at the beginning of the summer. So we need maybe to be a little bit more modest in our expectations because of the situation in which we are in. This is a small town. Our post office closes for lunch because we're a small town. If this were a big town, they wouldn't be closed for lunch. Jan, please, don't do this.
Please.
Don't do this, Jan.
Yeah, we're not into a debate here.
No, we're not. I am really giving my viewpoint, okay, just as everybody else has. Okay. But it's those kinds of tactics right there that have also caused some of the problems in terms of process. There have been hostile things said at some of these meetings. No doubt about that. There have been some belligerent comments made at some of these meetings. No doubt about that. But that, in my mind, has to stop. We have different points of view. We have different perspectives. They are all valid, and they are deserving of respect. Now, if we want a path forward, to delay this with more surveys and stuff like that, you can do it. If you want to be in a temporary place for 2 or 3 more years than anticipated, if you want to spend more money to cozy it up, go at it, okay? But it is not going to produce a community that is together on a new plan. That should be job one and the priority that should be your job and the library committee's job as the responsible parties for the future of the library. What will bring this community together enthusiastically about a new library? And it's my firm conviction, and it's as clear as the nose on my face, a little less expensive and a little less big will do the job. I am ready to support and to try to galvanize support for a library that's at least 7,500 square feet, okay? And $4 million or $2.25 million. What do you think people are going to rally behind? To me, it's pure common sense. Let's get this thing done, and let's just give a little bit and quit being advocates for one point of view only. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
$2.5 million, 2.5.
Okay. Are we ready to start?
Richard has something to say.
Oh.
I would like to follow up with Joe on a question. No. Is that okay?
Yeah. Okay, process, all right.
This is about when the finance.
Yeah, you'd asked Joan the question about when could the financial fundraising start, and then you answered that, well, you have to have a real plan before you can start fundraising. But then you also said, and the process of how this fundraising happens is that, well, the first thing you do is when you hire a consultant, they do a feasibility study, which means how much can you raise in this community? And so there's a contradiction here, I think, and that if you're going to ask people to plan a building and you're going to expect your donors to pay 50% of it, I think you better know, what does that represent? I mean, do your donors represent, if you want to build a $4 million building, do your donors represent, is it feasible to raise $2 million in this community? And so I'm a firm believer that if you look at, when this library idea came up 4 years ago, I went to Rockland Library. He chaired the Rockland Library Committee, and Tom Putnam. And Tom said the first thing they did when they started planning their library is they had a subcommittee that was out talking to fundraisers, potential fundraisers. And they got buy-in from them. They reviewed, sort of the thinking, and the fundraiser said, well, here's, I feel critical about, that it's this or it has that or whatever. And so you start nurturing and you get buy-in from those fundraisers. It isn't that you say, well, we have to do what the fundraiser is going to pay for, but you have to listen to them. And so, anyway, my question then, Joan, is how does that, can't a fundraising group start the same day that the planning group starts and sort of keep in touch with each other and have the fundraisers a part of getting buy-in?
A feasibility study usually has, in my experience, you have a prospective plan. This is the plan we're talking about. These are the parts to it. This is what we think we want to raise for it. What do you think about it? Is it too much? Is it too little? The main media workshops thought about building a new building on the RES site. And we did a feasibility study for that. And we took the prospective plan to potential donors. And we discovered that we really wouldn't be able to raise the amount of money that would have been needed for that site. So what I'm saying is you have to have something to say to people, are you interested, before you can really begin to have a fundraising project.
But given the work we've done, we're talking about going forward, the process going forward. Don't we have a lot to talk to potential donors about right now? In other words, well,
wait.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. So, select board. Where are we? We've heard a number of things tonight. Probably one of the first things that I took away from this is that we really didn't allow enough time between when the design was developed and when the vote was taken. That we didn't have the chance to answer all of the questions that started to percolate up. And they can't, from my perspective as to what I've been hearing, that people went to the polls with a lot of questions still in their minds, and we hadn't had that chance to.
Can I ask a question about that? Is it your belief that if the voters had had more time to understand this plan, there would have been greater enthusiasm for it?
I don't know, but at least the questions wouldn't still be, fresh in everybody's mind. We would have had more chance to answer them, address them, take more of a leadership role in
I don't dispute
getting that vote out.
I don't dispute that we didn't do a fabulous job of getting the information out. I was just wondering whether your position was that.
Well, we deliberately went and wanted to go to a vote in November because it was the presidential election year. We knew we were going to get a lot more people showing up to that than, say, next June, when really not much is on the ballot.
So I'm going to presume that we're talking about postmortem in order that we do it better from this point out. And I think what we, looking back and then looking forward, a lot of the comments tonight, not enough parking, not enough this, not, what about this, what about that, were all things that were consciously decided by the committee, but they didn't have enough of an audience to understand that and then say, they talked about this and this was the conclusion. Whether I agree with it or not, they did talk about it. There's bunches of people in the town who think that those subjects might not have even come up. A little bit frustrating for all the people that were, for this, 21 people that were there while those discussions were had. But I think that what is very critical, now you know that I'm a big proponent for surveys. We've seen people saying, if I see another survey, I'll kill somebody. And we've seen people say, you got to put out surveys. The essence of the survey, though, is for people to feel heard. And I will go along with anything where people, more and more people in the process feel, I now understand that my areas of concern have come up. They've been debated. I've had some input on it. Incrementally, they came to this decision. Whether I like it or not, I want those people, I want the people who have concerns to feel as though they're heard. So I wouldn't go back to the point where the plan was, put into place and then say we failed from that point out. I would say we failed prior to that, in that there weren't enough people being brought along in the process with whatever it took. Different meetings at different times rather than always at one point. Whatever it is that it would take to have everything televised, everything streamed, all of those things lead towards a more involved citizenry and a more people that know what's going on. So I think the most damning statement would be, I didn't understand this was going on. Now, we tried our best, but what we have to do is up the bar of trying our best. Back to you.
Okay, no. Ken, your take on that?
Tonight is a good start to hear from people. I agree that we need to hear from as many people as possible, at least those who have thoughts on it one way or the other. And we have to think outside the box of how to do that. Maybe there's a survey. I know there's some people that are advocating that and some people are ready to string us up if we do another survey. My thought on a survey is that whatever we do has to be fairly concise and brief. I don't want to send out a 10-pager that people, fall asleep after the second page, but just a few simple questions, because we need to gauge, I think, where the citizenry is on the vote. We had the vote, and it was a vote. It was a 9-vote margin, but it was a large turnout, so the vote is the vote. We know that. But for us to put forth another proposal without trying to figure out where the people are and how things can be changed, I think would be irresponsible on our part. I do have to say, we had a lot of nice comments tonight about compromise and listening to people and things like that, but in the end, I have to say that, everybody was saying, yes, compromise to my point of view. And so I think everybody in the audience, whatever your point of view is, you have to think long and hard about, can I change my point of view? Whether I'm a proponent of the RES site or whether I'm a proponent of a bigger library or whatever it might be. Because compromise is great when it comes into your point of view, but I think everybody really has to ask themselves, am I willing to compromise if it hurts a little bit? Because I think that's what we're going to have to do to get our 75%.
I'm reminded of the old adage that you have a good compromise if everybody hates it.
So hopefully we could do a little better than that.
There are better adages.
Yes. Brendan?
I'm a proponent of data-informed decision-making. I'm not yet convinced that the tool or mechanism or method exists for us to solicit that information and receive it in a statistically significant manner that's substantially better than this huge turnout at a vote that we just got. I really don't like gut decisions, but I think we also heard from people that there's at least a portion of the community that wants this group of people to take responsibility for decision making.
And I think it's time for us to do that. I mean, we have to. Everything from this point out has got to have 200% more involvement from this board than it has before.
And that means that we're going to make some people angry. That's the long and the short of it.
Guess what, guys?
That's why we get paid the big bucks. Yeah, I know.
So I want to follow that up with another question.
Sure.
What, for each of you, what did you hear from these people tonight that was new? And I'll start it off. I heard reference to a piece of property that might be for sale, adjacent to the library. That to me was
that's the piece in back. We've talked about that.
reasonably, like, not part of the prior proposals. So in that vein, we heard from a lot of people. What did we hear that was new?
I don't think we heard any new points of view tonight. But the question is, what is the distribution of those points of view? And that's the data that you're talking about, I think. That's what we need, is what's the distribution of those points of view, and how can we move towards something that's going to be acceptable to, and we'll never have unanimity. That's I think,
don't dispute that we need it. I need to be convinced that we can get it.
Yeah. And I don't know that we can, but I think we have to try. And I think we'll have to try with imperfect tools, because the perfect tools don't exist.
The alternative is to just ask these people to let us decide, and wear the angst and anger that comes with it.
Yeah. Again, we can recommend. We're not the ones that are going to make the decision. The voters, like 3 weeks ago, are the ones that are going to make the decision.
I understand it has to go toward go back to the voters eventually, but there's a huge amount of time and effort that can be consumed between now and whenever that happens. And if we don't believe that we're going to get better information than we have, I'm not saying that I feel that way. I really am hoping to hear from you guys. How are we going to get it?
This is our discussion. Sorry, Ames. Well, we have heard for a couple people tonight that we should get out there and talk to people. Focus groups, I think, was the way. Bill, you made a comment about getting out and holding meetings out and around the town. I think Bob Duke made a thing about large town meetings and holding those.
So
those before
okay, go ahead.
Those kind of surprise me, because we've done when we have gone out on these. The library did that listening tour 3 years ago, something like that. Very poorly attended, but the questions were being asked about the library. The same thing when we did our last listening tour. There were some of the nights that we had 3 or 4 people there.
But those nights were not a waste of time.
No, they weren't. We heard from the people that
I
chose
want to be
there.
real clear about that.
Yeah.
I think this discussion is premature until we, for 10 minutes, throw out on the table how far back we want to go, what we want to entertain. Because then we know what it is we're getting to. And I would entertain that. I think the simplest, the most clear input we've gotten is that this project will be passed if it is smaller and cheaper. And so
wait.
Well,
wait, please.
Again,
Jeff
it's a
here.
fairly clear message from a fair amount of people. Now, every single thing that we say, can be challenged because your viewpoint is different. But from a very practical level, we have 50% of the voting people said, we'll go with this threshold. 50% said no for a bunch of different reasons. Of the ones that said no, a lot of those conversations are around cost, which equals size. I mean, they're the same thing, cost and size. And by the way, they're the same thing at Lime Rock. No, they're the same thing at Lime Rock and RES. It's really
Okay, we're
but
not
anyway.
having a discuss, you're speaking.
But so I think we have to look at that, which means we have to look at the plans, which means we have to look at the design, because you can't just simply go and shrink everything by 18.5%. So with that in mind, I think what we have to do is lead the way through. We have to take it back to the point where we are opening up to new different designs by different architects and or the same, including the same if they're willing to do it. So that's how far back I want to go. In that process, because you're opening up things, but the good news is we're not starting with a tabula rasa. We have a lot of information that's been modified, and people have gone along with a lot of those modifications. So we have an idea that for some people the size works. No question, anything we build, whatever the size, it would be forward thinking to have a well-designed option for making it bigger at some point in the future. Okay, prove us wrong, prove us right, whatever. It can't be standalone. But with all of these things in mind, taking it to the point of design, again, means that we have a new opportunity to bring in all these points of view in the design process, to the point even of what Bob said, and he had to go off to another meeting, of a design charrette where you have things up on the wall, so that people can be heard, and as importantly, that they get the immediate feedback where someone knowledgeable, not me, because I'm, but someone knowledgeable who says either, yes, you're right, RES is a cheaper site because it's flat, or really in the long run, it's 2% cheaper. What does that mean? So all of those kinds of questions, which are knowledge-based questions, can be answered during the process of working on that design. And for me, I don't need to advocate for a survey anymore if we can come up with a way that as many people as possible are empowered during the design process, so that empowered plus they get feedback.
But what does that mean, empowered?
Well, what it means is that they're satisfied that somebody who knows what they're talking about heard them, as much as anything, honestly. That's it. We have to have a higher level of satisfaction with the compromise, because anything we come up with in the end, if we're looking for a 75% acceptance, people have to say, my concerns were at least listened to, and I now understand why some of those concerns are either, wow, I made a difference, they took this idea, or they didn't take this idea because of X and Y, but they got to know what X and Y are. So it's a two-way table. The empowerment is one side of the coin of the being part of the process and understanding certain things, nuances of a building, for instance.
I guess my concern with doing this and having more meetings and a charrette and all this sort of thing is that we're going to get the same people. And I really would like to find some way to draw some more people in and get feedback from a larger group of people. And I don't necessarily know what that is, if it's a survey or if it's something else. But coming to these meetings is time consuming. We all know that because we're here more often than you folks are. But you folks have taken the time tonight, and I see many faces that I've seen throughout the process, and many of the same faces. But this is, we had a turnout of, what was it?
83%.
3,800 or 33,000 people roughly.
83%.
A large turnout. And so this group that's here tonight is a very small percentage of that. And we will hear the same arguments again, and maybe there'll be some new information that comes out through the process that changes a couple of people's minds, but I think we have to find some way to gather information from a larger group of people so that we can move forward. And I'm willing, as a member of this board, to take some bold leadership, which will make some people angry and make a decision, but I want to have some basis on which to do that.
But I think that you get the people that don't show up regularly by, and I'm going to talk in sort of new age terms, by having an environment that's welcoming to them. You know, there were people who came early that stopped coming because they felt as though they weren't being heard, for one thing, and two, they felt that it was not a polite environment. So if we go back to that point where that input truly does mean something, because we've thrown it back out to architects, and most likely a subset of the original group will apply again, and they're in the phase where that input will mean something. I think more and more people will be heard, even to the point where we open it up to, you know, email input. We open it up to look at the live stream and tell us what you think. All of that stuff. But that's where we get. I don't want it to come down to numbers. I don't want it to be, oh well, we got another 75 votes and therefore we got a library. That doesn't help anybody. I want people to feel that that they were part of it. They have a sense of ownership in it. In that they were brought along in the process. And this is all process-based.
Is your position that there was a significant number of no votes from people who felt disenfranchised from the process?
I would say that there was a surprising amount of people that felt disenfranchised. Yes.
I guess I hadn't heard that.
No.
Well, I think
we heard one gentleman
I mean, tired
tonight
of the
that said he
acrimony,
had
sure,
heard very
but,
little about this meeting. You know,
Well, wouldn't you say that most of the, you know, talking in big broad strokes, that most of the folks who still want RES as a site feel disenfranchised? Yes. I mean, that's how I read it. This curtain notwithstanding.
How do we overcome that? The people that are adamant for RES.
Well, you find an architect who we think is the right person, and you have that conversation. And if RES, if you allow for 3 hours, no other political reasoning of RES versus Lime Rock, and you say, okay, this site you can do this in, this site you can do that site, and you can do all of this in both sites, then the concerns, aside from the actual physical location, the concerns can be ameliorated. So can you prove to me, as a person who, you know, I am a person out in the citizenry, can you prove to that person that parking will be okay on Lime Rock Street? Because they see flat, nice, American, suburban, lots of concrete, that's safe. Can you prove it to them that it's safe in Lime Rock? That's the job, not fait accompli. We have chosen this design, we've chosen this site, but that's the job it's still possible to go either way. Let's talk about it. And if reasonable people listen to an architect that knows what they're talking about, and they say, you know what, there's a really small difference in the parking you can have there and there, because we can do this, that, and that.
Can I make a statement and ask you guys to react to it?
I'll shut up.
I'm going to just concede that it is easier, less disruptive, parking's easier. I'm going to concede all of those points about the RES site and ask or say, I have seen nothing to suggest that opening up the conversation to include the RES site is the path toward a 75% passage of the bond. Just blow, I'm
I mean, I
thinking
would-
out loud.
I would-
Blow me out of the water.
I would agree with that, because as I said several times, I wanted to hear from people, when we had the RES vote, I wanted to hear from anybody who voted no on that site who had changed their mind, and I haven't heard from anyone. So my sense, and maybe I'm wrong, and maybe the process that Jeff is talking about can change the mind, I don't know, but my sense is that there is not strong support. Might there be majority support for the site? Maybe just barely, but I don't have the sense that there's strong support there.
How do we figure out yes or no on that?
Yes or no on the process of going back that far, or yes or no on whether RES or the Lime Rock is a better site?
If we were to go back that far,
Yeah.
and open them both, and how do you think we should proceed on determining whether the majority want this or that? And what happens if it comes down to a vote like we just had, where it's 9 votes difference or 10 votes difference? I mean,
Well, first of all, whether we have, and one of the things we have to talk about is June or November, but I see the energy, I see the knowledge base, everybody's knowledge and everybody's involvement in this is much higher than it was a year or 2 or 3 years ago. So listening towards that happened 3 years ago, to me, are meaningless. I mean, I'm sorry for the strength of that, but we're in a much different position now than we are before.
You're talking about informed public. That's
Yeah.
what you mean?
Oh, yeah. I think everybody's
No,
way more
okay.
informed.
I just want to make sure I understood what you meant.
But as well, at the same time, they may be more entrenched and with their heels digging in. So, I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought. So you can.
how do we figure out that basic question, RES versus One Lime Rock?
Well, one way is to say that if you don't believe that the RES site is, if you don't believe in your gut, because we don't have data, I mean, other than this,
Right.
if you don't believe that is the path to a 75% vote or whatever line you have, it's irresponsible to open it up again.
But we're talking process. We're not talking product. We're talking process. And from a
Or maybe
product
it's not irresponsible.
standpoint,
Maybe
yeah.
that's maybe I went too far with irresponsible. Maybe it's just likely to protract the process, and maybe you don't mind that.
Well, I think, in talking about process, I think what you're talking about is a 1.5-year project. If we're going back to design over again, we have to select architects again. We have to vet them and then have to get a couple of different designs and get public feedback. I certainly don't think we can do that by June of 2017, and I think it might be June of 2018.
Well, I disagree with you in that no architect is silly enough to start this from the very beginning. So I think our pool is a subset of those people that have already spent some time on this plan. And so if we were satisfied with, and all this stuff can be accelerated, it's just, but we have to push it. The
Can you
board has
flesh
to.
that out? What did you just say about why would we restrict ourselves just to the
Well,
architects
we're
who've
not
already worked
restricting,
on it?
but from a practical standpoint, I think those are the people that will answer an RFP. Are the people that have already put in 5 days of work in it and have thought about it. I could be wrong, and that's fine.
I think you're going to get other firms who may not be busy at the time or who are interested who will respond. I don't think you can
That'd be
you can
great.
limit that, but I mean, just talk about an RFP. Drafting an RFP takes time. Yes, we've already done it once, but we'd have to do it if the way we did it failed by 9 votes for whatever reason. So,
Well, the RFP for the
result, the
Oh,
result
that's-
of the end result of the going through the RFP
Right,
and
right,
all the process
Yeah.
subsequent to that.
I wouldn't
failed by
hang that
9
on the
votes.
RFP for.
no, but I'm saying as part of the process.
Do we believe though that if those 9 votes had been in favor, that we'd be in good shape?
I don't think
No.
so. If
So
you know,
why
if
is
it
that-
had switched the sides, we'd be in the
Well-
same position. It's not an overwhelming choice.
Because the reason we go back that far is because I go and have lunch with Ames and I say, Ames, you were at a meeting last week, it's 8 weeks from now, where they talked about this and that and that. And what you're asking for can be done here, or that, whatever it is. And person by person by person, they come around. That's how we do it. And I don't think,
Good luck.
well,
You
we
got
have
your own peanut gallery.
apparently, yeah. Where's that damn curtain? So,
Yeah.
so I think that I love surveys. I love getting the information. But the thing that doesn't work there is that there's no change thereafter. It's like, haha, you lost. You know, we got this many people that want this many people that want that. Sorry, you're in the minority. That's why I'm willing to give up surveys in a heartbeat if we have a process where we can say at the end of it, we worked 3 times harder to get you guys at these meetings. Some more of you showed up. Here's the result. I may be dreaming.
Am I allowed to ask the room a question?
Sure.
Can I ask for a show of hands? Is a successful and completed library more important to you than the location of the library? Yes, raise your hand. Is it more important? Is it more important to build a library than where the library is located? I have no agenda. If you can't answer it, then don't answer it. All right, that's fair. No, that was an inconclusive answer, so I
Okay.
it's fine.
Maybe, what's your?
It feels dangerous, but if you guys are willing to work with us,
I think everybody sitting in this room wanting to work with you. I think that's the point of us still sitting here instead of leaving, frankly.
Everybody in this room wants
Ken?
one.
Jeff?
I'd
Open
be
it back
happy.
up to a more public comment?
I'd be happy to. That's my point all along. So
Okay.
I have to live and die by my own sword.
We'll
Uh,
open back up for public.
But I guess if people want to do it, please do come to the microphone, and Ames is going to lead the charge.
and I should also say another thing.
Yeah, you're buying.
Another thing popped into my head about the things that we heard new. That I don't, Ann, I think it was you. I don't think anybody had previously talked about pulling down the library, or at least I hadn't registered that prior to.
I think a couple of the emails that we've received over the last week, a couple of them have mentioned, let's get beyond the building, that it's not worth it, just get rid of it. You know, again, those are individual opinions.
Right. And by the way, before Ames speaks, it seems a little weird for us to have gotten a bunch of letters and not having at least read them out loud, in the sense that that is input to us, but it's input that this crowd and live stream, if we don't read them, will not have an opportunity to react to. I throw that out there as process question.
Well, let's.
I have copies of mine to give to Linda, or I don't know if Steve Betts is here or anybody from the press, but I'm happy to hand those to you tonight. I want to say 2 or 3 things, and one of them is because you're new coming on
I
here.
am. Yep.
So that I think there's a process, and I won't belabor it because so many people know it already. The original library, the so-called original library, who spent the $10,000 grant and got the design by the Scott Simons architects. It was an institutional appearing, 14,000 square foot design. So when the vote was taken, that question 9 vote was taken, people had that in their minds, and they also had the campaign that went very strongly through town with lots of signs that said, keep, expand, improve the current library, and it showed a photoshopped addition to it, which made it look like it could, all of that could be done for only $500,000. So a lot of that vote, that was a no vote on the RES site, was based on those 2 factors.
Not just
We've
the
now
site.
had another vote, I think it was true, we've now had another vote, and people, for whatever reason, weren't totally satisfied with the recent proposal. I think it's okay to go back and forth on these things, you know, whether we end up at One Lime Rock or RES, and obviously you know my opinion about that. But I think it's okay that we're having this long, ongoing debate to see these things. What I think, I want to support some of what Jeff's saying. I think that we need, based on this history of kind of going back and forth, I was on the steering committee that met for a year, and no wonder Jan's burnt out, because he led that committee for a year. there was a unanimous decision from that committee for the RES site. And what happened? Everybody said, oh, well, the select board basically said, well, no, we don't want that. We're going to go. It was very bizarre how this has worked. And the person who spoke about the trust issue, I think a lot of us have a lot of mistrust about the select board because it looks like it's kind of an old cronies network and we know what we want, and no matter what you say, that's what it's going to be. For better or worse, that's what it feels like, okay? So I think there's more to the RES site than the parking issue. So I don't want us necessarily to focus on if we buy the building behind one on Lime Rock, now we have parking, because that's not the issue. There's several key points. I put this in my letter. I just want to say it one. It's accessible to everyone who lives in Rockport, the RES site. It is theoretically more easily built upon so that the building there would be more cost effective. It's a flat surface. Construction building vehicles can be off the road. You don't have to redo roads. The traffic patterns can go on as normal. It's easy access because of the major highways that you have there. People, you could put a single-story building on that site.
So we're talking about process, by the way.
I am talking about process. I want to make sure, no.
Okay. Oh.
I want to put, no, here's what I want to put out, because you said you need more information. Why, I agree with Jeff. Let's get another design, not the 14,000 institutional building on RES. Redo the one at the One Lime Rock sign, if you want to make it smaller or more appreciated by people who support that site. Let's do cost comparisons on these things, not just focus on parking, but in terms of building costs, what we have, operational costs, what's possible. And I think that would make a difference for the citizens. They could really see, these are the two options, these are the two sites, here are the buildings that people could really get behind, what's it going to cost us, and what do we want for our future? So that's really the point I want to make.
Okay. We haven't heard from Betsy. Yep. Then you can, Jan.
Hi, I'm Betsy Elwin. I'd like to just build on what Ames said, but there aren't just two options. I think there are three options, because some people still think that we can renovate the existing building. And I think that's a non-starter. But I think people need to realize there are costs associated with that. There's costs, we're going to continue to rent for a long time. We're going to have to, test for mold. We're going to have to renovate. We're going to have to do all kinds of things. So I think everybody's entitled to a point of view, but you're not entitled to make up your own facts. And I think there's been a lot of misinformation that there is a no-cost alternative here, which is doing nothing. And I don't think that's true. And I think that we have a lot of information about the RES site. We have a lot of information about the current proposal that was just voted down by 9 votes. And I think what we need is to come up with sort of a simple grid. Here are 3 options: RES, the Lime Rock site, do nothing. Here's what each one is going to cost. Here's what a 4,000 square foot building, or whatever you think might work, 5,000 square feet. Here's what it would cost on RES. Here's what it would cost on Lime Rock Street. And, what problems get solved by each of those. And just look at it now, because we're looking at an RES vote that took place years ago when people thought that renovating the building was still a possibility, which it is not, after now learning more information. So I think that because this has been a moving target, we need to bring all those pieces together in a simple format to say to the people of the town, here are the options, here's what they would cost, what do you want to do?
You want to entertain Jan, and then, and this is all about process.
I want to clarify a couple of things that have come up. First, I want to say much of what's been discussed here tonight in terms of trying to find answers or processes to things, we've done that. If you would simply read the reports that were written for the steering committee and for this committee, ad hoc committee, you will discover that you are rebuilding, reinventing the wheel in much, it could save you a great deal of time. Second, one of the reasons that we're in the trouble that we're in is that both of the committees that I chair, the steering committee and the ad hoc committee, were bound by constrictions that were put on us.
Instructions from this group? Yeah.
Not necessarily.
Okay.
Some came from the library committee, some came from select board. Ames mentions that the steering committee voted for the RES site. The second, we looked at 6 sites. The second site was the existing site. Excuse me.
Yeah.
One of the reasons why, or the main reason why the RES site came in first was that we were told to find a site where we could put up a building that could eventually be expanded to 14,000 square feet. The library's current site at One Lime Rock be very, very difficult to put 14,000 square foot building on that without totally destroying the park. So it lost points on our grid for not being able to hold as large a building. That 14,000 foot end 30 years from now possibility is the number that the people who did not want a new library took for their mantra. It's 14,000 square feet. Therefore, it costs $6 million. That was never the intention, and that was not what we came up with. However, the 14,000 square foot number is a legitimate number insofar as we were required to find some place that would handle it. There were only 3 spots in town. One was going to involve a 4-story building downtown, cost way too much. The other 2 were the RES site, where it would be simpler to do rather than out at One Lime Rock Street. So there are all kinds of subtleties. And if you're going to go back some distance, I would go back far enough that you avoid the restrictions that we've been under for the last few years and start with a totally blank slate. I would suggest, having looked at all the properties available, that you limit yourself to the RES site and One Lime Rock Street as being the most reasonable sites to build on. It's not clear from my talks with contractors, it's not clear that RES is an easier site to build on. That is maybe a red herring. We need to have those discussions again. But I would suggest that you start from a nice blank sheet of paper in terms of what do we need, what will we support, where will it go, what should it look like, all of those kinds of things. The 7,500 square feet of programming space, or 8,750 or whatever it was, came out of some studies that we don't necessarily have to obey. We can do as we wish. We are a real town. This is America, okay? We still get to do what we want to do. So if you're going to go backwards, and I think at this point we really need to do that, that much larger ideas need to be brought to the forward. And I like to, just to promote myself, there was another new idea brought up tonight, and that is the idea of integrating this with a comprehensive plan, which we'll look at, because the RES site is so valuable that it should be thought of as a unit. What can the town do with it entirely?
Jan, before you leave there,
Yeah.
with your experience and with your frustration that you may or may not have gotten over.
I haven't.
Okay, well, be that as it may. Do
Makes me
you
apologize to Paul because I haven't gotten over the frustration level. Yes.
do you think that how much time would you estimate, given that we're at this level now, to go back to
I
a
think
clean
the
slate?
worst thing that happened to us in all of our votes was making the election the deadline and then having to count backwards from that. We just did that with the ad hoc committee because we had an August deadline to present a finished design, in terms of pretty good cost estimate, because of when the ballot was going to be printed, because there were going to be all these people. And I like a 4-year election because lots of voters, I think, everybody is better off when more people vote, whatever the vote turns out to be. try not to make, from my point of view, I would say 2020 is pretty cool because it's another presidential election. I wouldn't say that you need to be bound that way. I would simply, give up your lives, go to work, find 20 people in town that come from a wide variety of backgrounds and locations, and sit down and knock heads and work it out and see what date you're looking towards. If you're going to start with interviewing architects, that's time consuming. They need 3, 4, 5 weeks to do these kinds of things. Jeff, I think the idea that the guys who busted their butts and didn't get the job can't wait to put in a new RFP is crazy. Really is crazy. We did not get the second time the same people we got the first time. Thank you.
Jan?
My name is Bob Baldwin, and I'm a very big advocate of a library, and I think it's critical, and I know everyone in this room does. I think that we're not going to have a library in our town unless we can find a consensus, and that means that all of us have to be a lot more flexible. And I think that it's ridiculous to even think about going ahead without a consensus. I think we need a concept that we can get, and not just one group or the other group get excited about. And that's not going to happen in this environment, because too often in the past people have gotten up to give their opinion and they've been cut off. They've been told, sit down, and we don't want to listen to that. And I think that the committees, the select board, have all had an agenda, and I'm afraid it hasn't always been as representative as possible. And I think large groups have felt rather left out. And I think that in one of those groups are the people that aren't here today. There's an awful lot of people in our community that vote, but we don't hear from them. And a lot of those people don't even come to the library, and probably don't have a big interest in having a larger library. And I think I'm of the opinion that if we can be more civil and polite to each other and discuss these things, that they should be able to be hashed out. I mean, we're all coming from a love of this institution. I think we need to put ourselves in a room and just hash some of these things out and come up with something that doesn't please any of us totally, but that we can come away with and say, this is something that I can be behind and that we can take to the town. And if we can get a strong consensus before we start messing around with this, that, or the other thing, I think it would go just a lot smoother.
Before you speak, one of the things that I'm hearing tonight that seems to be, I'm sort of split, is take your time, move quickly. So.
I agree.
Take time and move quickly.
I think you've got it right on. It's about 50-50. I'm Jim Ruddy. I live here in Rockport, and I've been watching this closely. I think there's a number of things, but one of the things that we run into, and we have run into during this whole process over 5 years, is just like tonight. I mean, we have a meeting. There is an agenda. On the agenda, it said we're only going to talk about process. And I have to say, the most time that has been spent this evening has been talking about proposals for RES. Now, there's nothing wrong with that, and there's nothing wrong with the people who are interested in RES and would like it to be there. But I know an awful lot of people looked at the agenda and said,
that's fair.
In the agenda, it also said we will have future meetings that we will talk about location, we'll talk about size, we'll talk about budget. And a lot of people took that to heart, and they didn't come. And so this is being live streamed. A lot of people are seeing this, and they're seeing a very, very one-sided story here. And I think that's really unfair. So I don't think it was intentional by any means. I think this is the way small towns do business. We do it that way. We get into a meeting and we start talking, and it's natural. There's nothing wrong with that at all. It just gets a little out of whack sometimes. So I think in the future, we just have to make it really clear what we're going to talk about, clarify with the public, and invite the public to speak, with all of that in mind, so we're all playing on the same field. I just think that part's has been a little out of whack. I just want to clarify one thing, and I think Jan will back this up. The steering committee came up with a recommendation for the RAS site. That was the recommendation that you guys put on the ballot, and that lost by several hundred votes. So it wasn't a close vote back then. It wasn't right after the 14,000 square foot Reed thing. This was a year and a half later, and it was very clear what that vote was. So what it means now, I don't know. But at that time, the RES was voted down, not by 9 votes or anything, it was voted down by 400 votes. So, we just need to, if we're going to talk about the past, we need to really get some of this information straight. I'm sorry, Ann, that I mentioned that I thought what you said was wrong, but the library often says that they serve 30,000 people. You have 30,000 visits a year, but many of those visits are from the same people. It sounds very often that we're saying we have 30,000 separate customers.
Okay.
And, that's all I'm opposed to, that's all.
Okay.
I hope that we can go forward with this with maybe, providing a couple options, but at least one of the options should be a smaller, more reasonably priced library. Why we can't have even a mock election or something saying, here's a big one, here's a medium one, here's a small one. Let's get a whole bunch of people together and see if there's enthusiasm for A, B, or C. My last thing is, I don't care what side you've been on and what side you're on. This last election and the meetings leading up to it were all very interesting, but there was absolutely no enthusiasm from anyone. No one was really pleased about any of this. So the vote turned out 50-50, a wash. Nobody cared, and nobody really was excited about this thing at all. Why is that? Why did we go through all that? Why did we spend thousands of dollars on architects and end up with something that people went to vote for and they kind of just half voted for it? So I just wonder about that. I think that's the bigger question that you guys have to think about. It's not really the voters' fault. Somehow we got something in front of the voters that no one really cared about, and it showed in the vote. So that's our mistake as a town. Let's all take that responsibility and try and do something about it. All right? Thank you. And thank you for opening this back up so we could all speak. I think that's a real great first step in a good direction.
I think the point about process is well made for me. I mean, I think we did advertise that we were going to be talking about process and allowed it.
Yeah, I mean, I think the difficult part is that
I didn't mean to suggest your other points weren't well made. I just found that one
I think the
particularly
flip side of
resonated.
that from our discussion is that then we have to gavel people down when they go up to the podium and tell them they can't speak, and I think that's tough to do.
Yeah.
I'm going to, just for the board members, I did this, threw this together, and just my first shot at a survey type thing, very simple.
But this isn't saying we are definitely.
No, not at all, not at all. It's just, it's my draft.
Mr. Chair, do you want to
Yep.
get the noise down?
Excuse me.
Folks, our meeting isn't over yet.
Yeah,
If you'd like to.
Excuse me, we're not done up here. If you do want to speak, if you would, you can take it outside and then come back in later if you'd like. But we need to continue our meeting here. And actually, if you do speak, that nobody at home can hear us either. So, did you want to make a comment?
I would like to give it a shot.
Okay.
My name's Brinkley Thorne. I live in Rockport, just up the hill from the library. And I guess in listening to it, one of the things, the questions I had on the process side was that it seems like if trying to hear one side wanting a larger program for the library in order to move into the future, a library needs to have certain resources and be exciting and move forward, and that leads to size. And on the other hand, as Jan brought up, that you've got a very valuable site in the RES site, that at some point, if the program is big enough and exciting enough, that warrants a site like the RES site. On the other side, if the program is not that large and dynamic, the RES site is really being underutilized, and the question for me was, would the town approve a smaller library being on the RES site, or would they turn that down because it was not a didn't have enough potential really to fill that site?
That it didn't use that site well enough?
Didn't use it well enough, that they're really
Interesting way to
bigger,
look at
more
it.
exciting,
Best use.
more economically community building, vital kinds of projects that are going to take more time to develop. Maybe some kind of mixed use situation, whatever. But those two are sort of, at the first level of process, is to come to put in front of us whatever it takes to come up with a decision about how big should this program really be for the library. Given, there's Camden and there's Rockland that are both good facilities. As an inhabitant of the area, I go to both of them in various ways for different things, and I've got plenty of meetings in the Camden Library and support that, and I do some wonderful things with grandchildren and reading and things in Rockport and so on. That issue, do we use, is that an issue that gets in the conversations where we have available to us these two other larger libraries that are part of our experience and assets of learning in the community? Are we really using them? Does that count in this dialogue, or does Rockport have to look at providing all the potential of a library for these 3,000 people? Are we really motivated to try to provide all of that from our building for ourselves, or do we really need to hook it together? But if you decide on the side of the site, that program first, if the program really needs to be larger, then I think the in-town site has some serious drawbacks and becomes you're trying to jam too big a thing in too small a space. And I think if it's too small, you're trying to put too small a thing on too valuable and important a space. And if you can get the program into a certain range, you will have solve that in the half of the people that are on the side that wanted the large site, but you have decided for reasons that you finally gotten consensus on that it's a smaller site. You could bring those people back into the process. Given it's going to be a smaller site, how do we make it work as like a bigger site or whatever? I think that same thing sort of happens that I think Jeff was saying about design pieces. In a way, if you listed all the things that people really wanted, if you need more parking and they're worried that the small site doesn't have ease of parking, doesn't have enough parking, to not reject that at this meeting, but put that up on the wall, parking, how much more parking do you need to make it feel convenient? What makes it really convenient? And give somebody, the person with a pencil who's drawing the thing that is actually going to be built is the person that has a lot of power in the end. We can all say, yes, that's an important idea and it's great, but in the end, somebody sits there at a CAD machine or with a pencil in their hand and says, parking goes here, and that square, we can fit in 15 spaces, and this square we can fit in 25 spaces, and this square we can fit in, you want to sort of hold on to, more parking is one of the things people want. Good handicapped access is something people want. And intimacy is something people want. For me, the fact that the whole town the little village town of Rockport that's got the opera and the Union Hall and Bay Chamber and Main Media, this is a really incredible, unique little physical environment, and the library is a very important part of that. And just pulling that out because it's a little cheaper to build it over there, also has an impact on the whole town, on the restaurants, on the use of the town. And how do you put something back in that works that way? The town that I lived in for a while took their post office, which is right in the middle of the town, and then they wanted it bigger, so they pulled it out of the town and moved it to a shopping center site very close by, and it's very convenient. You can drive there, but you don't meet your neighbors, you don't crisscross, you don't have to get a cup of coffee on the way to the post office. All those, it takes a lot out of a little community, and we're struggling to get these restaurants to stay alive in this town, and they need the help that they can get. So I think that's a positive aspect of it. And I think the value of the RAS site is a very positive aspect of that site, that it really needs to be, it's a very prominent, good site that could bring a lot of activity and community building support to this community if it's done well. And it'd be a shame to underutilize that. But in the short term, it'd be very nice to have a flat, to have it be easy to build and to spread it out on one story. But I think we should hold on to responsibility to use that site really, really well. But I would hope that we'd sort of make those decisions, sort of start at the appropriate size one, because it determines which physical site you'd want to go to. Get the program agreed to, then get just keep working down that system. The parking, how much parking do you really need to service a library that's the size that we end up wanting to have? And in a place where you really want to, for the future, encourage biking and walking and things versus how much do we, how important is the ease of access for, being able to drive in and park next to the door. Well, sort of talk about those issues one at a time and solve them, working down the hierarchy. Okay, I'm sorry. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Brent.
Yeah. Something that he just mentioned, came back to me, that that original conceptual design that was funded through that $10,000 grant had a meeting room in it that could seat 75 people or so, because it was physically removed from here. The design that was just proposed and defeated didn't have that in it, because
It's right next to this.
it's right next to this. Physical separation is an issue. That other one did have other smaller meeting rooms, smaller than the 75.
We're talking about process, right?
Well, yeah, I know, but it was something that occurred to me that I thought I would point out, because
All
we're
those kind
talking
of
about
things.
shrinking things.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah.
All those kind of things where, for instance, are inside Jan's head because he's been at every single meeting. But what we need to do is get those kind of, this means this, this means that. You would have you may have a larger building at RES because of its physical removal from everything else. Those are all things that more people want to know, and that's why I just want to get it more accessibly.
Well, I was just getting back to what Brink and what Jan have said, and trying to keep it on process. Do we feel that we need to go, when you talked about how far to go back, are you talking about going back far enough that you are reopening the program discussion? I mean, this body did a lot of work trying to define that, and at some level, we either need to accept that work was done responsibly, well, and correctly, or we're going to look at doing it again.
I would support digging in our heels a little bit at that point, in that I think that it has been modified, and I think that a lot of this stuff just takes time. You live with it, and I think that Ben has lived with a lot of stuff, and he said, "Oh yeah, maybe we can do this with 10% less space." And am I characterizing the experience accurately?
Do you want me to come?
Oh sure. Why should you be exempt?
Hi, my name's Ben. I'm the library director at the Rockport Public Library. And when it comes to the program space, I have learned some things. We've evolved as we went through. There have been a few reports done, there was the library committees. Then I was asked to do one as well. Mine actually was bigger than the library committees. I was working with architectural ideas. I'm not an architect. So when we worked then with Reed and Company, they did show ways to sort of double up and use different spaces better. When it comes to the program space, at least for this last iteration that we went with, I think that was the sweet spot. I think it was perfect, to be honest. I mean, we could have used it a little more storage space. You can always use that in any new building. But as far as program went with what we had proposed, the staff was very excited about it. I was very excited about it. It gave us room for expansion within the building without even thinking about anything else. It let us do our jobs much, much better. So, it's not my decision to decide what the community wants from the program of the library. We're going to do our jobs the best we can every day because we love doing our jobs. So can we look at that? Sure. I think we've come to a point where we've found what we can do optimally with this plan that we had. But again, it's what the community wants out of the library. And I'm more than willing to help find that out. And if there are things that we've put in this plan that the community doesn't want, okay, maybe we don't want that. Maybe we want something else. That's not my decision to make. My decision is to be, or my job is to sort of help guide the way libraries work and help talk about that with people. So we can look at anything again if we're talking process and go back and see, we are a very small but mighty library as far as our statistics go, and just about everything we do extremely well. So that's I guess my piece. If you have any questions.
So if you had, just to put it in black and white, if you felt tremendous amount of pressure to knock that down by 1,200 feet, you could take a deep breath. You could look at the program. You could look at the space and work with the architect. And you wouldn't be running out screaming.
No, of course not. I mean, we were in 3,300 square feet, and we made it work somehow.
Which is
it wasn't
the point
easy,
that a lot, right?
And it wasn't pleasant.
Well,
again,
and by today's standards, it wasn't legal either because of ADA requirements.
It wasn't legal by any
So we
means,
do
and that's
have
why
that
when we moved into the new space, we became ADA compliant for the first time in 70 years, and we ate up 5,000 square feet on day one. That place is too small today, and we've done a lot to work with it to make it work. It's not a pleasant building to be in either. I mean, there are definitely improvements for both the staff and the patrons and the collection, but there are definitely things that are unfixable about that building. In the children's collection, shelves are 6 feet tall.
Are you back to status quo with traffic, or are you up or down?
It's hard to say. Last month, our statistics were up in some some of the traffic was up. It's too soon to say, really, as far as that goes. We will have only been in that place a year come the 22nd of December. So any of the numbers I'm comparing to last year are still in the old building. So to get sort of statistically relevant numbers is a little different. But I think we're pretty much back to the status quo as far as that goes.
We need to keep in mind that building was not built to be a library.
I get that.
It was an industrial building.
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman? As we got into this process, and when Reed and Company came in, one of the things they commented about is the fact that the work that we've done so far is we've done a lot of analysis of our program, our books usage. The work that the Ad hoc Library Planning Committee has done, the steering committee, the library committee, that work is there and it's still valid. It's all valid work. And when he came in, he said, we've done more work than most towns do when they engage the architect. So that information's all there. At this point, it's much like doing the budget as we get into the budget process. is you just decide what's the number, and we can make that number match, and Ben will be able to say, okay, to get us in this size space, this is what we will be giving up. Just like when we do the budget, when we make cuts, it will show what we're giving up, and then you'll have to decide if that's a cut you want to make. So I think, the questions we need to answer are not about that part of the process, because that information's there, it's still valid, it's still credible. The library committee and ad hoc planning committee has done a great job with that. The questions I think that are still out there that need to be answered is, what is the tolerance of the voters and taxpayers for what will they support when they go into that ballot booth and close that curtain? That's that may be a different number than what our program and all of that stuff says we need. And we need to balance those two things together so that we, and I totally agree with Don, I think it was Don Flock that said that we should be going into the polls with confidence we're going to get 70 to 75% of the vote. If we had won by one vote, we would have been in the same situation now. We would have won, but we wouldn't have been much better off.
Pure victory.
Yeah, it would be just a pure victory. But I think our approach needs to be get the 75% vote, and we need to answer some threshold questions. The site question is a question that needs to get answered, and the quicker it gets answered, the better, because the site is going to dictate design, cost, some of those things. So the site question needs to get answered, but then the size, and size will dictate cost, and then what's the voters' appetite for those things.
Back to process. I passed out this first shot at a survey, and I just want to sort of sense the board's thought about this, and this would be something that we could do fairly quickly. Maybe we do it SurveyMonkey, maybe we make it available for people. And basically, for those in the audience, there's two separate surveys, one for people who voted no and one for people who voted yes. And there are 3 questions in each survey. That's all it is. For those who voted no, which of the following best describes your primary reason for voting no? And then I have 15 choices, all the things I could think of, from the building was too big to the budget committee's recommendation was not unanimous, whatever it might, all I could think of. Second question is, if your primary reason for your no vote was changed, were there any other reasons that would have still caused you to vote no, which will give us some idea of the depth of their feeling on that. And then the third question on both is the same, by the way, asks what's the level for a bond that you would like? Is it 2 million? Is it 1.5 million, 1 million, 2.5 million? Something that gives us some indication of what the voters might support for taxpayer funding. And for those who voted yes, the question is very similar. Which of the following best describes your primary reason for voting yes? And again, I listed as many things as I could think of, from I liked all aspects of the thing to I'm tired of the controversy and want to move forward. And then second question, if your primary reason for your vote yes, for your yes vote was changed, would you still vote yes? And then you'd have the choice, no, my primary reason is very important to me. Yes, I'm willing to compromise further to get a new library, maybe, whatever. And then the bond question. So I just ask because I'd like to come out of this meeting this evening with a next step, and I don't know what that next step would be, if it's something like this, or if it's just to agree to meet again and talk further about what our next steps are going to be.
Well, clearly, we're going to have to meet again at some
Yeah,
point.
well, that's obvious.
We're not making the progress
So
here.
I just, I don't know whether this. I mean, tell me if I'm all wet with this. Is this a stupid idea, or is it worthwhile?
I mean, I'm new to this. What precedent can you point to that this will bring back a useful number of responses?
I can't. It's just an attempt, and I feel like we have to make an attempt. I have no idea what the response rate would be. People may say, "To hell with them. I'm tired of all this. I don't want to do it anymore."
So sticking to process, I guess, do you have a number in your head where if we don't get more than that, then we're not going to actually.
I mean, how many people did we have here
this?
tonight? We had 70, 75 people maybe tonight? Yeah. If we could get 300 responses, I think that would be more than we have ever gotten at a public meeting.
Well, Linda might be able to help me with this, but the comprehensive plan, which I've slept since then, but
Just a little.
That was a process that was as inclusive as anything this town might have done. We sent out a very involved form and got 475 back.
Okay, so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. But they were very surprised at the amount of returns that we got.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I remember filling it out.
And I purposely made this thing very brief because I don't know that people have the tolerance to sit down and go through a multi-page type thing.
I didn't mean to ask that in a challenging way. I really was just curious about it.
It's a perfectly legitimate question. I understand
Mr. Chair,
completely.
Yeah.
Pat might want to.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, we got 3 people now that want to speak.
I was just going to say that when I was in graduate school, the rule of thumb on surveys was if you get a 20% return, you can count yourself lucky. So whether or not you think that's a reliable feedback of number, I think you got probably a better cross-section tonight in terms of, different people from different persuasions coming in and speaking. But I don't know that this is enough of a number. We've got 3,300 voters, is that what we have? Something like that, or is
No,
that
it's
just
not
the
that
total
many.
population? I know there was 2,300 who voted.
2,300 voted.
What was
And
it,
that was
2 weeks ago?
83%. Yep.
Yeah.
And I understand that we're never going to get the perfect response. It's just from my point of view, it's another way to reach out to some people who perhaps haven't been heard yet.
And I have to say, I was one of the people that did the door-to-door thing, only I went way out to Vinyl Street and West Rockport and all over, places I had never been before, which was really fun. And I'd go up to a door, and about half the time, there was somebody there. And I want to say, now I'm remembering, but at least a third to a half of those people who were there when we asked the question, we said, we're here just to promote the vote. We want you to get out and vote. And do you have any questions? They said, aren't you guys considering RES? And that totally bowled me over because like you all, I thought that was a dead question. But there are people out in the community who couldn't figure out why we weren't looking at both sides.
And obviously, that's one of the choices on my rubric here.
Whether or not they'll answer your survey, I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know.
That's the real question.
Did you want to speak? You haven't spoken yet tonight. What? You'll need to come up here.
Oh,
No, you have to come up
because
anyway.
they can't really hear you at home. And we're
Or
doing the live
you
stream
go
so
home
we have a
later
record.
and look at yourself. At hour 3.5.
I think a lot of work has been done, and I think the gentleman here said that research, all the information that has been done that's valid information, and to go back again, I think is really hard. I also think from different things that I've worked on that designing by committee is not always good. You end up with beige and burgundy because no one can make a decision. And yet when you come into a room where someone has painted it green or a wonderful color, you go, wow, that's wonderful. Or there's a clear vision. It's very exciting. And you lose that when you design by committee, unfortunately. And I think, as Brandon was saying, someone's got to, grab the ball and say, this is what we want, and then market it, really get the community behind it. And it sounds like you didn't have time to do that, to really explain to people what the different issues were and why the decisions were made that were made. You hired an architect who's designed a lot of libraries, and he made a set of decisions. And maybe it's going back to him instead of starting from scratch and saying, here are the issues that have come up that we need more parking, or someone brought up the point about the building behind might be available. I mean, different things have changed. And, but I know just designing by committee, like what Jeff is saying, you end up with something that's just very bland. And we don't want that. You want something, and also, just another project that I'm involved with is things are changing rapidly, and libraries are changing as information centers, and you want to be able to offer that, right? And I think the other point that Brink made is we've lost the MCA, and if you lose the library, what makes Rockport Rockport?
And as we've worked in other communities, it's really important for the community to understand what makes Rockport Rockport. And nourish those things, take care of them. You don't want to lose those, because eventually you're going to lose your sense of what this community is. So I think you really, and that's not going to come out of, you know, some of the, no one brought any of that up tonight, of what makes this community, and what do we need to nourish and take care of. And I think one of them is the library. And I think it being in the middle of the town is really important.
Excuse me, what was your name?
Maisie Cox.
Okay, thank you.
I'm married to that wonderful gentleman over there, Brink Thorne.
To clarify my point, because I love it when good, smart people tell me how I went wrong. I'm not advocating design by committee. I'm advocating design, good design work where people are brought along and see the process so that they understand that their certain concern was taken into account and is either accepted because of that, or because of X, or is rejected because of Y. That's what I'm looking for. And I agree 100% with Maisie that design by committee leads you to strange-looking animals.
Okay.
Can I just say one thing?
Oh.
Okay. I can't believe I'm going to, Linda Clancy, Penn Bay pilot, but also Rockport resident, and I can't believe I'm going to say this, but in this community, we're saturated with communication and lots of media, but what we don't have in Rockport is a truly direct way of communicating with each other. And it's not website, and it's not newspapers, and it's, I firmly believe that it's direct mail to every household and making every citizen feel as valued as possible. Whether or not you do a survey, that doesn't really matter, but I think, well, I'll leave that to you guys. But Jeff, when you brought up the comp plan, I think that was a really effective way of reaching everybody and put it back on the citizens themselves. So I think whatever you do, send something to every home.
Okay. I think Jan wanted to say something.
I sort of thought.
Oh, okay.
Real quickly, Rich. I just wanted to say that in response to what Brinkley said, yeah, you've moved, I totally agree with him. And I think that one of the things that maybe we've lost sight of is that by choosing the 1 Lime Rock Street as the site for the library, also basically limited the architect's options of what they could design. Because at the same time, they were given a site that has half an acre or less of property, which is a little bit difficult. They also were told initially to see if they couldn't design something where there would be like 8,300 square feet of usable space. Well, the only way to do that on half an acre is to go up. So then suddenly you have to include in your non-usable space your 2 stairways and your elevator and a bunch of other stuff, which I think is how they got to over 9,000 square foot total footprint. And I guess my point is, and that was after shrinking the usable space to something like 75 or 76. Do you remember what it was, Ben? You'd think we'd have this memorized. But anyway, my point is that if you, as a body, was willing to open up the concept of finding a design for the RES site versus finding the design for the 1 Lime Rock Street site, the public may be able to compare the two as 2 choices. One that could be 1 floor, no elevator, and so forth. I think there are certain things that we have to make sure we cover in terms of what do you need. You need enough linear feet for books. You need enough space for programs. You've got a different population. How do you solve those things? I think you can solve them with 2 different designs. So I guess I'm just asking that perhaps you consider the option of having a comparison. And I agree with Maisie. You could go back to Reed and ask them to reconfigure. And you could probably even go back to Scott Simon. And I sure as heck wouldn't go for a 14,000 square foot thing. That was something that Scott Simon initiated, not the committee, as I remember it. So that's just an option.
Okay, thank you.
I just want to come back and, because Brink and Maisie brought some interesting new thoughts. It was good to have some new voices here because the rest of us have been listening to each other for 3 years here, talk about some of the same points. But I think the thing that resonates with me as I listen to this now is that it's time for you guys to act. And that's what I said in my letter to you. Be bold, be decisive, go. You've learned a lot. Jeff, Rick brought the point, how much we've learned. And I think we're close. Okay, we're very close. Now, we're miles apart on whether it's RES or One Lime Rock for vested groups of us. Okay, that's just not going to go away. You're not going to convince me to go to RES. I'm never going to convince those people to go to One Lime Rock. Okay, it just isn't going to happen. No amount of talking, no amount of convincing, coercing, schmoozing, whatever. It just isn't going to happen. We're always going to be there. And so you've got to make a decision. Is it going to be One Lime Rock or is it going to be RES? Okay, get that behind you, then go on. And I suggested 5 ways to go about this, 5 points to make, the challenge. And I made the point, there were some hints of it tonight earlier, and I made a fairly strong case where you guys really ought to consider you're the cause of all the angst and all the contention that goes on. And Jan talked about constraints that his committee had from the library committee, from you. And they were boxed in. They were playing a zero-sum game because if they gave in to something that they had, they decided this is the best library because that was their challenge. Come back to us with the best library. They even came back in April 19th and asked you, do you really, is it okay for us to keep ignoring what we think voters will approve for? Our job is to come back with the best library we can conceive. And you sat there and you agreed, yep, don't worry about what the voters say. You come back with the best library. Well, that's going to build contention, okay? And so you, by the challenge you gave them, the instructions you gave them, you created this contentious environment that this committee was going to be playing. If they gave into something that one of us want, they lost. It's a zero-sum game. So be bold, get a new committee, get some people like Brink and Maisie who have had experience building, who have, and people like Charlton and Betsy and sorry, I forget your, Eliza, who had experience raising funds. Get them on that committee, and all of them working together and building this consensus as we go. And you're close. You know that 49% of the voters, 49.8% of the voters will support a bond for $2 million. Okay? So choose a number a little less than $2 million for your bonding capacity. Now, we don't have any idea what donors will support. Now, I know Charlton and Betsy had said, well, we believe we can give $2 million. Well, I don't know whether $2 million is realistic or not. But you need to have it. I mean, you're close. A little smaller, a better aesthetic. The idea of the Scott property to maybe really take away one of the big complaints that whether it's real or not, it's there, so it's real. It's parking, access. Okay, so get somebody going. Get a committee going and give them some very precise instructions. You got to be in this price range, need to be in this size, But you have to get a donor base coming, and you have to come to us with enthusiasm. Convince us when you're all said and done here, you've got a good set of donors that are going to give you 900 or $1 million or whatever you need to balance out the balance of what you're going to raise. And then we'll put it on the ballot if you've got it. But until you can bring us those donors and bring us this enthusiasm, rather than this contentious group that you keep hearing every time you come out here, you just hear the same group of 75 of us saying the same thing. No, you don't take that to the ballot again. So anyway, be bold, get moving, make a decision. RES, One Lime Rock, then what's the price range, what's the size range, and get going, committee, and come back. And if you don't do that, then you are talking 2020.
Okay. Liza, at one point, I think you wanted to make a comment.
Just going to let Ken know that he already, then he talked about his survey, that there was compromise. I think a lot of people, the size and location, sorry. It may be, all right, to get up here.
Yeah.
That there was compromise on the yes vote as well. It wasn't people, that some of the people that voted yes that I've talked to felt like that was a compromise. So, just so you're clear, that it isn't all just the no votes that were,
Well,
anyway.
we heard from a couple tonight
Yeah,
that said they
exactly.
voted for
I
it because they
understand that.
thought it. Yeah.
And that there is compromise on the library committee is willing to look at different options. It's not like we're set in stone on, anyway. That's
Okay.
all.
Thank you.
We have to go back for some personal reasons, but thank you, everybody, for the core group of people who really stuck with us.
The hardcore here.
I'm just not feeling well, so I have to
Okay.
go.
Thanks.
Anyway, thank you for hearing
Thanks
us
for
out.
coming.
Thank you.
For all the hard
Thank you.
work, a lot you put in.
Helen?
Helen Shaw, Rockport resident. One of the things that I had heard sort of flittering through the rumor mill over the past few months is that there was only one option. And I think the last time when we voted for RES, the question came up as to why are we only presented with one option? And Joan sort of addressed it in one of the letters, I think, to the editor, of presenting people. I guess the confusion was that if you gave the people too many options, they get all confused. But maybe in this case, if you've got size A, B, and C at RES, and here's all the statistics, and A, B, and C at Lime Rock, and here are all the statistics, the cost, and all of that. Maybe you want to do a ranked ballot. So people, I am not in favor of ranked choice voting, but in this case, it might get you a better a compromise result.
Helen, while you're up there, let me just ask you, the school board, in a sense, did that when they spent the last couple of months going both to this body and to other groups, and they said, here's a matrix of our three options, and here are a sub-check, within each of that, and this one means this, that, but won't include that, et cetera, et cetera. Would you find that to be a reasonable way of sussing out the options?
I don't think a lot of people know what a matrix is, much less how to read one. I think if you said...
Okay, so let me get more specific. Okay. You as an individual person, did you see that matrix from the middle school?
No.
Okay.
Never saw it.
Okay.
I took matrix.
Well, it wasn't necessarily. It was three choices. It was a do nothing choice, which wasn't do nothing. It was still spend some money to fix the pressing problems. It was to renovate the current school or to build a new school. And they came around. They talked to us about that. But in the end, they had to choose one. Because you can only put one on the ballot. Yeah. If you put more than one choice on the ballot, then you run the risk of getting a non-majority vote, and I think that would be worse.
That's why I'm saying you should do ranked choice.
Ranked choice does not guarantee a majority.
I know
sorry.
that. That's why I don't like ranked choice. But I'm saying in this case, it might be an option for you.
As an intermediate step, maybe.
Yeah.
Yes.
But
if we could do that, if we could do a preliminary ballot.
Right.
It says here say 3 options for RES, 3 options for Lime Rock, and you rank them 1 through 6 or 1 only, or none of the above.
Another choice. That's right.
Yes. Yeah. And like I said, I normally ranked choice voting is anathema.
Yes, thank you. I bring that up as a process point that we could adopt with, because it's not limited to a June or November, but it is a way of getting that. And again, as Linda says, direct mail, directly connected to everybody, et cetera, et cetera. But that sort of, call it a matrix, call it whatever you want. We could go the route that Rich says and say the RES people will never agree with the Lime Rock people.
But we had a few numbers.
Right.
People here tonight said that they were RES, but they voted for it to get a library.
Right. So,
That's a different. That is absolutely going to happen. I mean, that if there will be those of us who want a library bad enough, will vote for. I'll always hate. I'll never agree to RES, but if that's really the only choice, maybe that's the choice I have to make.
Okay.
But in any event, I don't agree that those people always have to be over there. That the two groups have to be so mutually exclusive, and that part of the process that I think we should look into includes just as much as possible bringing people up to speed on design decisions as they're made, so that they understand why something stuck to the wall and why something's fell.
Okay. Yeah.
Well, speaking of process, and it was, I forget who made the comment tonight, but do we need to make a decision on the scope of the program and the size of the building before we make a site decision?
I thought Ray's point was perfect.
Yeah.
On that regard. That the size of the building drives the site. You could waste a site, or you could overbuild a site. So I think that coming to the program, and therefore the size of the building, makes a lot of
So,
sense.
the one thing I would add to that, though, is that, you sort of have to add the caveat that as long as we believe there's a prospect, there's a path for that program to receive.
Well, I think we
significant
know that we
majority
don't
of
think the
votes.
program should be any bigger than what was proposed. That's the sense that I'm getting from the people who were speaking tonight. I didn't hear anybody say that they thought the size of the building or the scope of the program should be any larger than what was proposed.
Well, or even, even if they do feel that way, there may be people who feel that way, but
Maybe.
but don't,
I didn't hear it
but
tonight.
don't understand or understand that it's not feasible.
It doesn't have the support it needs.
Yeah.
I have heard from a couple people that they voted no because it was too small. We're just going to be going and we're going to be making an addition to it in another 15 years before the bond is even paid off.
So,
that sentiment is out there. Is it a major sentiment? I don't think so, but it's still there.
Well, I bring it up because if we can make a decision, and let's say just for the sake of argument, we decide on a 7,500-foot building. I'm not necessarily advocating that.
Come on.
No, but I'm not necessarily advocating that. But if we make that decision, then perhaps we can go to say, okay, we have agreement on that for whatever process. Maybe we have a meeting and we have a vote on that of some sort or whatever. We have an agreement on that. Okay, now let's see what 7,500 feet looks like here, and let's see what it looks like over here.
As much as I want to open up to lots of people, I support that leadership element early on, because I think that's, the things that I keep hearing is too expensive, and we don't like it aesthetically, and then I hear a bunch of other stuff. But I'm not at all. I think that's a good idea for this board to take leadership in setting that particular parameter.
7,500 square foot building. I assume you mean the exterior of the building.
I just picked a number out of the hat.
No, that's not my point.
No.
My point is, at RES, you can contain X amount of space. At One Lime Rock, it will contain less space. So, talk carefully. Are you talking about interior space, exterior space? Do you understand that interior space takes up more space when it's in 2 stories. There's ramifications and details.
Well, that would come in, and that would come the second step of this, is if we decide whether it's total square footage or usable square footage. If we make it, as this board makes a decision on that, then we say, okay, now tell us what that looks like, and that's going to take into account what you're talking about, which is if it's a 2-story building at One Lime Rock, it's going to have a larger total square footage. If it's a 1-story building at RES, it might not be as big.
And you need to include Ben, because obviously.
Absolutely.
You're losing
Yeah.
services.
Right.
when you make because
Right.
he squeezed every little thing he could in the existing.
Yep.
Might it, 'cause I like that line of thinking you're going, but might it be, rather than get locked into a square footage number, might you, taking Brink's concept, because that was a new idea I never thought of before, is that a good use of the RES space? In other words, might you just say, well, do we think we have a building that One Lime Rock, do we need a building that One Lime Rock Street, or are we gonna end up proposing a building that One Lime Rock won't hold? Then RES is, the natural answer.
But
do we think we can have a building that One Lime Rock can hold? Well, is that building a waste of the RES site? Or are the other disadvantages going on? In other words, rather than get locked into, just look, do we have a building that One Lime Rock can hold?
But then a complicating issue here, as somebody mentioned tonight, is, does the Scott property become available? And if so, how does that impact the design on what we call One Lime Rock?
If we're going to decide, if this board is going to take on the challenge, and I'll say it the challenge, of determining program size and therefore square footage, then those questions all come later. Then our first task is defined for us, and that's to work with the library committee and with Ben.
And work very closely with the people that have already been through this.
Because they've done a lot of the work already. I mean, Ben's document the first time was fantastic. That 4 or 5 page document that he went through and justified everything through there. And now,
That's a little wrong, though.
well,
Yeah.
but you told us tonight you've learned more.
Fantastic,
So
but
there's
wrong.
an asset there. The library committee is an asset because they developed the program size first. So let's inform ourselves from the vote and from what we've heard tonight, which is, maybe a little smaller, and then this board can use those people to come up with a number there, and then that gives us a foothold to move ahead from.
Okay, then when do we want to start this?
Yesterday.
Yeah.
When's the library committee next meeting?
I just want to ask.
December 12.
December 25th?
20, no, somewhere around the 19th or 20th, whatever that Monday is, the third Monday. Yeah.
All of what we're asking for, though, doesn't need anybody else's meeting. It needs information they've already gone with. I'm interested in Brendan's question.
19.
You are advancing the notion that programming square footage is the first decision to be made. Yes?
I'm advancing the idea that programming needs, which then determine to some extent square footage, is the first. I'm suggesting that that's another way to go about it instead of choosing the site.
I have no ulterior motive about this at all. That has been done. The programming needs have been provided.
Correct.
So what you are...
We're asking for I would be asking for a modification. I'd be asking for Ben and the library committee to go back and sharpen their pencils.
All right.
Come back and then put the decision on us.
So Rick's analogy was apt. This is similar to the budget process. We understand what the perceived need is. We are asking for a as yet unspecified reduction.
Right.
And are we doing that on the basis of budget? Or are we doing that on the basis of which of these programs, services for the community, can you stomach deleting?
Or reducing. I think it's...
compromise, whatever. I'm not...
It's the library committee's purview to look at the program.
I
of the
hope the
library.
community will take my poor language about value judgments and just toss it
I mean,
out.
and because the library committee is elected, so it's their part of their charge is to work with the library staff to come up with and determine what the program needs and policies are for the library. So to me, that's the first stop, and to use the expertise of our library professionals, and to them to come to us, and then we have to say, okay, this makes sense to us, or it doesn't, or whatever, and then we have to, we're being asked to stand up and make the decisions here.
So this is equivalent to a statement that we heard and read what the programming was. We don't think we can get that for you.
We don't think we can get the
didn't.
money that is involved in the square footage that program calls for.
It's not we don't think, we didn't.
Yeah, but when you start to talk about didn't, there are lots of attributes that are tied up into that.
Yeah,
We are now saying that any shell, any location, we think this programming is a little too much.
I think that's what we heard tonight.
Well, no, I mean, very, very specifically, we are not looking at programming so much as we are looking at the price. We are.
This is what I want to get to.
No, you're absolutely right. In a sense, it has absolutely nothing to do with the programming.
So I dispute, I have a little background in design, and I dispute the conflation of price and square footage. They are not always, they are related. They are not equal to one another.
Well, we also had a lot of other costs involved in there that skewed the numbers. And if we were to just look at RES, we'd have a completely different set of numbers to gain exactly the same thing. We had demolition of the building, we had redesign of the intersection, we had redesign of the park, redesign of Lime Rock Street.
We were so close to a decision a minute ago.
I know. Now, I diverted myself. Going back to you, do we want to put it back to the library committee and tell them, well, tell us what you got to cut to get down to this square footage? Or do we want to give them direction on where to start to look to cut? There was the meeting room that had, I think it was 35 seats in it. What would happen if it were 30 seats? What would happen if you shrunk the distance between those stacks? And I know, I see your hand. I'm talking to them.
Those are
shrink the space between the stacks, because they said that was one of the ways that they could expand the number of volumes there.
Again,
was to shrink.
have you learned an analogy, though? That's like us
budget.
saying, show me how you can take 10% out of the fire department budget, when in fact what we really want is show us where the money comes from. We need to take a little out, right?
Well, I think the library committee heard the same thing we heard tonight. And so I think going to them to ask them, how could you modify what you presented to us before, and with the idea that we heard less. So.
But if you use the budget, the budget analogy, and we'll be discussing this next Monday, it's a lot better from my perspective, and I would think it would be better from Ben's perspective. We haven't talked about this, but it's a lot better from my perspective when it comes to the budget for you to tell me, we need the budget to come in at this, or we want to meet, this is our goal, and let us make the cuts to get to that goal, rather than having you or us say to Ben, well, we want to squeeze this down, we want to do that. It'd be much better to just say, here's what we think our target number is, and Ben, how would you make that work?
And tell us what you're giving up.
As we will with the budget.
But Ben wanted to speak.
No, I can sit down now because Rick basically just said it, but I would agree with that. I would prefer, if you're going to ask me to shrink something, tell me what the size is and let me and the staff figure out how to get to that. Yeah. Based on sort of professional standards, what we think we can do with other spaces in town, how we can look at that. We've been living and breathing the square footage number until everybody sort of forgot about it in the conversation when it started to go to aesthetics and location again. But I would just prefer doing what Rick said there. Thank you.
But again, we've learned nothing if we sit here and try to be architects. And so with that in mind, honestly, what we're looking for is to spend less money. And if we could do that and give Ben everything he wants, whoopee. And it's a building that lasts more than 2 years.
Yeah, I mean, the flip side of that, and maybe this isn't a very helpful comment, but if a smaller building, or at least a building where we ask for a slightly smaller dollar value to be shouldered by the burden of the taxpayers, is so inspiring that it inspires people to open their wallets, I'm not sure that people are going to complain about spending $4 million.
If it comes in privately, because the genesis is...
I just worry that we're not having an honest conversation when we connect the dollars to the square footage.
Okay.
Well, we got to know what the dollars are that we are talking about. Are we talking about the dollars to build the building? Or are we talking about the dollars to destroy the old building and move the street, move the intersection, and this and this and this?
And it doesn't seem fair to turn to Ben and give him a dollar value.
Yeah, okay, Ben, bring it down to $3 million. Well, you still have all the rest of this stuff going on around. Or do we look at the building cost and say, do that?
I understand. You need to connect. Yeah. For planning purposes, you need to connect size and budget. I get it.
I mean, to your point, let's say we could magically take the plan that we had and get a bunch of builders to come in, and let's say that the bids come in at $3 million for that same building. Does that then pass?
It's not going to happen, so.
The no votes were not about the dollar amount, but the actual size and design.
Size and design are very important.
And location, size.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But those in that set.
So that says, and that the size is, if that comment is correct.
Both sides,
Yeah.
small and big.
So, I mean, it appears as though we are resolved that we are looking for less. We're now trying to communicate
How much less?
or how we're going to ask them to get to less.
And it's also, depending what happens as far as site goes, if more land was available on that Lime Rock Street, it changes everything as far as the design, because the design was taking into consideration the concept that was developed. It was 2 stories. Dick and Cynthia were very sensitive to several things. One is not terribly overburdening the lot. They wanted to, they're park people, so they wanted to have enough green space around the building so that it still looked good. They were also very sensitive to the Scott property, which was immediately behind, and not interfering with the view of that building, from that building down the road. And if there was more land available and those were not concerns, he would have come up with a totally different concept, and most architects would.
Just a quick question here. What is the likelihood, probability, et cetera, that the Scott property might become available, and if so, at what cost? I understand the lady is still living, so I don't want to be morbid about this, but I mean, it's been brought up. So if we're going to look at that, then somebody needs to investigate the cost.
Or I know the property is not currently for sale.
Right, so
I think that's all
it
we
shouldn't
can-
even be part of the discussion then.
Well,
Can't go any further with that.
One of the issues is any real estate transactions are not done publicly. We can't can't transact real estate dealings at a public meeting.
It's one of those reasons that you can do an executive session, but.
Which we're not in right now.
Which we are not in. But,
But I just want to make the point that, if at some point in the future, that mythical property becomes part of the mix, are you gonna add the cost of purchasing that to the cost of the building, which he then has to shrink the building so that you can meet the cost? I mean, let's be fair here. That site, just by its siteness, is an expensive site because we're talking about changing at least 2 or 3 roads, possibly buying it. I'm not going to say it out loud. And all of that is part of what may drive the architects to build a smaller building. I'm not sure that makes a lot of sense because I'm thinking about this building being something that carries the town of Rockport forward for the next 50 years.
I hope so.
I mean, please, let's not do this again.
Well,
in 10
and
years.
again, I'll go back to the idea that if we're going to look at this scope of the program and size of the building first, then all those questions will come later.
Well,
If
but
that's
you're
what
gonna
we're
ask him
hearing.
to shrink the building before you know what the other variables are.
That's right. We have to start someplace.
But the board also has as an option, you know, the concept of the improvement to the intersection is a standalone project, and it would be an improvement, the improvements to the intersection and the additional parking, regardless of what happens with the library. That's a big improvement to the walkability and the transit of the village, that part of the village, and could be looked at totally as a separate project from the library.
It really is a separate project, and also because of the fact that Maine DOT may pay for some of that.
We'll pay for.
But the magical word is may. You don't know how much or anything.
Right, which is why it has been a separate issue from the library. In other words, that intersection improvement could happen whether or not the library is built there.
And the question is, would we get enough support to make that change? The one area I'd never heard I shouldn't say a single complaint, there were a few complaints, but a lot of people liked that piece of the equation was the changes to the intersection and that more green space and those changes, a lot of folks like that.
For the record, for anybody who happens to be listening, I heard several people grumble about a perceived sleight of hand about cost, advertising that a project cost X and you separated out this critical component of the project for reasons of making it appear as though the project cost less. I'm just stating what I heard from some of our fellow citizens. That's different from whether or not they objected to the geometry change.
No. Somebody was watching and they wanted me to ask something or bring things up. So you'll know that the live stream is working.
Yeah, last I checked, there were 18 people watching.
Yeah, so I don't know if I'm going to do this justice or not, so I'll do my best. But the person watching really wants you to more focus on location first. And I agree with this to some degree, well, to a large degree. And part of it is what Jan had said. When you look at location, you're really looking at basically a 1 to 2 story building, is the way I'm thinking about this. To get a good size on a one Lime Rock, we need to probably go, in its current configuration, we need to go 2 stories. If you go to RES, it could be 1 story. A 1 story building can be smaller and still have more program space in it because there can be less walls and stairwells and elevators. So before we sort of start looking at cutting the program space, I do, and I believe this, and I'm not site specific. You could put it on the moon. We'll still do a great job and love our, do what we can for you. But
I think your patronage would shrink.
Yeah, the patronage would probably shrink. But yeah, it'd be expensive to get there. It's true. Not very accessible on the moon, but we do what we can. But I mean, it does have impacts in the program size within the building, and the square footage of the building is small. You get a better program size in a smaller building if it's 1 story, as opposed to 2 stories. So I think that focusing on the location is important, and there is no easy way to pick the location. You know, I have been here a while, not a long time. I haven't been here for the full history of this, but I mean, it does seem like that's the crux. Oh, I tried for you. This is Parker, who was watching, who wanted to say these things.
Sure.
So I'm going to step away.
Okay.
Thanks.
So we've been watching at home on the live stream, and I'm hearing everybody talking about shrinking budget. And I guess the question that I'd have is saying, you've got 49 plus people, or percent of the people that said, we like this, we like the program, we like what you're doing, we want to vote for it, we want to support it. You've got a, 51% that for various reasons didn't vote for it. They didn't all come out and say, the program's wrong. They didn't come out and say it's all too expensive. They said it's not right. Maybe it's the location. Maybe it's not the location. My recommendation is pick the location. That's where the transparency fell apart. There was a lot of people that said, well, why not RES? I've heard that from numerous people here. I hear that in the barber shop. I go to the barber shop and they're like, RES is the greatest place ever. It's too important. So fix that. Answer that question for the people. Say, is it more expensive? Is it not more expensive? It's easy to say, I think it's flat. It'd be easier to do. I'm not a builder. I don't know. But if you could answer that and get that off the table, I think that's going to lead the way. I think that's going to allow people to say, oh, okay, I understand the location question. Therefore, I'm on board. Or they'll say, wow, I can get twice the library or 10% more for less. I can save money. Maybe that's the way to go. But I think if you answer that for yourselves, then everything else will fall into place. And again, don't immediately just think it's a program size, it's a budget issue. I don't think we heard that from the voters. That's my 2 cents. Thank you.
Thank you for running down.
Thanks for coming.
Sorry for being out of breath.
Okay.
So I guess the question comes down to, do we want it to pass or do we want it to be widely supported? And how do we go about either one of those goals? I mean, would we be happy if it passed with a plurality of 50 in June, whatever it is we put forth? Or do we want to utilize this as an opportunity to try and bring the town back together? And maybe that's too big a burden. I don't know.
Well, and now we're back to the process
Yeah,
issue.
absolutely.
As to, if we're going to try to get something in June, what do we have to do now? If we are willing to wait, what do we do then? Because, we could just go right back to them and propose a building that's going to cost no more than $2.5 million. We may not have a design, but we could do that. Or do we want to think this through, evaluate what we have learned, what we think we know, what we do know, what we suppose we know, and take our time to do it? That becomes the issue is when. And then everything starts to fall into place, because it tells us what we can do if we have a when decided.
The issue is only when, if we allow that tail to wag.
I think the issue is when we're ready. I don't think we can allow ourselves to be driven by a time deadline. That's just gotten us into trouble.
We've
before.
already said, I think we've said, we don't want to put something in front of the voters again.
That's not going to pass.
Unless and until we're highly confident it's going to pass.
Well, then we have to figure out what will create that groundswell that will pass.
Yeah, and we were on our way, and I thank you, Parker, for coming down, because I mean it's a point well made. It doesn't seem like the budget sunk the vote, right? I mean, it may be too high, but it doesn't seem like that was. I guess what I'm saying is if our goal is something that's going to pass without difficulty, then part of that process is to try and bring the number down a little. It doesn't seem like it needs to come down in half.
No, I don't think so.
But But we do have to prioritize these attributes that we have to take them off the table.
Do we want
They
to
have
try
to
to
be taken off
gather,
in sequence.
do we want to dive into the decision process ourselves here, whether it's choosing the size or the program or the site? Or do we want to try to gather any more information from the public other than what we've heard tonight?
Well, let me sort of turn that around. If we were going to try that, where would we try it? When would we try it? And how do we
can't-
focus on getting new statements,
Well,
new people
I
to
don't-
speak as opposed to the same old people as
I don't think we
has been
can
pointed
answer
out.
that question
You know.
until we decide whether we want to do it or not.
That's you guys,
Well-
same old people.
I think we have to decide if, do we think we have enough information to start making decisions and moving forward?
I think we have, I think we have the mandate to start to move forward and at every step of the way, hope that we have meetings that are well attended. But, you know we have to up the communication. I think that that's self-evident, on top of everything else. You can't turn around, you can, but it's obviously very frustrating to have people in the town say, oh, I didn't know about this, or I didn't know about that. And it's never gonna be perfect, but it just means that we have to do more and do more, and that's, and part of that doing more is to start to move ahead. I think if we want to start looking into the questions of size and everything, we don't need to wait until after another, library committee meeting. We just, everybody who is going to help us get more information already knows that information. Except for, the input of the same or a new architect. I'm picking on you a little bit,
Yeah.
Bill, because you were saying,
I'm trying to be provocative. Provocative.
Oh, provocative.
That's maybe another new word I just made up.
It came out as, it came out as provocative, and I wondered what that was.
It's not that late.
Maybe that too.
So I think we can move ahead. To answer Ken's question, I think we move ahead, but at every step, we invite, any and everybody, if for nothing else, to listen in on the conversation.
Gentlemen, don't take it personally, but there's no need for you to go asking questions because frankly, you haven't been at this long enough to know what you want to ask. You need to start working, and the questions that you think you want to take to the public will fall out of the questions that you have among each other. And at some point, you will be asking questions of people probably a few times. You're not going to get, there is no such thing as perfect information. You have to work with what you've got while you've got it and develop new questions as you learn more about what you're doing, and then go back to the public. And I will also say, I heard somebody say SurveyMonkey. It's a very elitist tool in a town where a lot of people don't use the internet, can't afford to.
It'll slant young, it'll slant affluent.
I was the one who mentioned it, and I wasn't mentioning it as the sole way.
I understand, but I understand.
One method.
But Linda's comment about every door direct mail, she pushed this at us. I agreed with her. We did it. I think it was a useful way of getting a hold of people, and it really does take away everybody gets it in the mail. They know you're thinking about them, as opposed to having to find out that there's a SurveyMonkey out there, or they have to go to the library to pick up a survey, or go to town hall to pick out a survey. If you're going to ask questions, send it to them.
You sent out.
We sent out 2 mailers.
2 mailers. They were postcards.
They were postcard size, yeah.
Yeah. What was the cost of one of those mailers?
I'd have to get the invoice from Narrative, but my understanding from the research that I did, what I remember is to deliver to every residence in Rockport something that you can hand to the post office. It was about $460, but we had it all. We paid for printing and design and so forth, and the company that did the printing also did the mailing, which I was not particularly thrilled with because I never got the first mailer, and neither did a lot of people that I know. So I would be careful who I used on that. But every door direct mail is a relatively inexpensive process. Comes in different sizes, yeah, of course.
Linda wants to speak first.
Yeah, just to clarify that, when we did the, what did we call it? The Rockport Sessa Quincentennial.
Yeah.
We sent out 2 mailers, and I believe it was $800. Rick, I think
Yeah,
it wasn't more than
it's
that.
not-
And you're right, the size was variable. You could do, yeah, and it
Not very
was
expensive.
terribly effective. And then you can send people to the website or wherever you're going to send them, but start with that.
Yeah, I think it needs to, when you're talking about that, you need to use multiple approaches to get the information in people's hands, because some people are paying attention to mailings, some people aren't, and some people are paying attention to other
So
forms.
are we talking about this in terms of gathering information? Because I asked the question a minute ago, do we think we have enough information? And now we're talking about direct mail. Are we talking about this to gather information? I'm just asking, because I'm a little confused here.
I assumed that's why you were talking about it.
Because I'm for gathering more information,
Well,
but I thought
both
we
for
had.
gathering more information, but also for communicating.
Well, for informing,
You know, if
yeah.
we've got major decision points and we want to hear from people, that would be an appropriate time to send out the question and say, we're meeting at this time. You know, either do it this way or do it, or come and see us. You know, that could be an approach. You know, $400 doesn't sound like a lot, but
You do it 3 or 4 times, it adds up to real money.
If it hasn't been budgeted for,
We'll find it. This is the library we're talking about. You know, it kills me that we're sitting here saying, oh, you know, $2,000 in mailing is you know, too much money. This is the library we're talking about, and
Yeah, I
and this
know.
is something that's
Yeah.
splitting our.
Failure
but
has
again,
been
we
expensive.
have a budget that we have to stick to. You know, we can't tell Ben to go and, you know, stop buying books so you can, you know, help us send out a mailer.
What do you guys envision would happen if we did something that was perceived as utterly autocratic and just started making decisions?
Well, Jeff and I are, you know, up for re-election in next June. You know, don't know if we're going to run, but you know, if we made autocratic decisions that enough people didn't like, I'm sure we would have somebody running against us, and maybe a whole flock of them or whatever.
That's personalizing something.
Yeah, I
you
know. I am.
From the standpoint of the town.
Sure wouldn't increase trust. Go ahead. Sorry, interrupted you.
I don't know that it would decrease trust. It depends on what it is. If we decided.
That's right.
You know,
We rank just
hang
above
on.
used car salesmen.
That's right. Yeah, I left my plat at home. If we decided, for instance, that it was important for this project to come in at 20% less money, you know, as an autocratic decision, would that be our death knell for trust? I don't think so.
The decision tree that I'm talking about, I mean, I think, you know, we were voted to make hard decisions. And the decision tree that I'm talking about is the first autocratic decision is that we need to do whatever it takes to get a proposal in front of the voters that's going to pass.
That's the win in any. That's the win by one. We're okay with that.
No. I guess part of my autocratic decision is that we want to pass it with, you know, X, and we're going to make arbitrary decisions. You know, we don't have any data, but we're going to do it anyway.
Well, if you don't have any data, then you run the risk that it goes the opposite way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean, I guess I'm approaching this from the position of being perfectly happy about getting fired.
Yeah.
Okay. The one thing that has been coming through this entire evening is why did the people who voted no vote no? And a survey question, if you list 15 things, you're just going to lose everybody. But if you say, did you vote yes, did you vote no, and why? List 3 things. Then you will know how many said it's too big, it's too small, it costs too much, I don't like the site. And it's going to be a roaring pain in the you-know-what to tabulate all of that. But you will have your answer. Why did they vote no? Why did they vote yes?
kind of what that's what I
Yeah, that's
put
what you
before-
started
put-
out
put
with.
forth before the board here.
Okay. Well, it's really getting late here.
Yeah, I think
and I think
we're past the
pretty
point
much
of
past our prime.
it's been a workshop, and
Yeah.
we didn't make
And I
any
think we
decisions.
said we weren't going to make
No, I
decisions,
know.
Can't
right?
make any
I mean,
decisions.
Well,
It would be.
but we can set a direction as to when do we want to start, when do we want to meet again on this topic? We don't want to have it as part of one of our regular select board meetings because we're already 3.5 hours in.
2 weeks from now.
2 weeks from now? That would,
That's
Look, I'll do it tomorrow.
I can't tomorrow. 2 weeks from now would be the 12th.
Yep.
Well, it would be the 14th.
harumph.
Yeah, the planning board's here. At least according to what I know.
Oh, is today Wednesday anyway?
Yeah.
What about the next day? What about the Thursday?
Okay, so it turns out what I said 2 weeks from now, I'm in DC.
Okay.
The whole week?
Yes.
Okay.
But Owen will be back.
Yeah.
Where is Owen?
He's
doing
taking
school
graduate
things.
school.
Oh, he's in.
Week at a
through
time.
Case Western, and he's at one of those week-long sessions, the intense part. What about, I'm gonna throw it out, December 6th, Tuesday.
Tuesdays aren't my favorite, but
Oh.
but if that's what everybody else needs
I'm
to do.
still here
it's-
then.
Tuesday's fine with me.
Tuesday,
December
well,
6th.
Tuesday,
Thursday is also a possibility, I think.
Tuesday, December 6th.
Tuesday the 6th or Thursday the 8th?
Is Owen back by then?
Yes.
I can't do Tuesday, but
You can't do Tuesday?
no, but you guys can do it.
What
Thursday
about
the 8th?
Thursday?
I could do Tuesday or Thursday.
Thursday is better for me.
Thursday I can do.
Let's do Thursday the 8th.
Does Thursday the 8th work for you?
Yep.
Okay, I got a nod there. So
Okay.
Thursday the 8th.
What time? 7?
7 p.m. right here.
And
Workshop or meeting?
yeah, can we try and be as explicit as possible about the agenda for the public?
Well,
Workshop, pick up where we left off.
And are we gonna set a meeting so we can take votes, or do we want to take votes, or?
I think we want to have it open for that, so I think we should start back into meeting mode.
Okay.
I'll,
The 8th.
yep. Okay.
And we're gonna get an agenda out.
Try to get one tomorrow, Friday at the latest.
Not that I've contributed a lot, but I'll be here for that. So,
We could wait and like do it on the 15th
when
Rick's
I'm gone, yeah.
No, we got a date that everybody can
Yeah,
work
Yeah,
with. Let's
I
stick
know.
with
That
it.
works, that works for me.
Let's go with that one, okay. And I will try to circulate an agenda.
Linda's waving her hand over there.
Just clarify as to what the purpose of the meeting is,
To move forward,
to move forward with.
starting to answer these questions that we have stumbling on here.
To move forward with the process of the future of the library.
Next steps for the library, yeah. We don't know where it's gonna go, quite honestly.
I get that, but to give the public.
It would be, it would, I mean, I hope this next time there aren't any off-limit topics. Not that there was anything wrong with that this time, but we stumbled into something that wasn't processed, and I think that may have been my fault, and I apologize for that. But it would be great to.
Well, everything we heard contributes to the process that we
Well, I think,
adopt.
we have to decide, as we move forward, do we pick the site first? Do we pick the budget first? Do we pick the size first? What do we do?
All open for discussion.
Yeah.
So that's our discussion. I think
So
that's our
all
discussion.
of that is on the
Do
table.
we do a mailing and immediately
That has a
seek
question,
for?
yeah.
Yep.
I have a
We still have people watching at home.
I have a suggestion which will sort of set the stage for this next, yet again, chapter. which is for the and also have you guys look really strong. Sort of make a statement or have in the paper or something someplace that the select board, after this meeting and consideration, is planning to move forward, and then maybe state that there are some undeniable facts. One is that we need a new library. This is not up for debate. We are not able to go back into the old building. This is not up for debate. Now, I realize, some of you are now, your eyes are going sideways, so I know you're thinking about it.
You're right.
But I think this is really the first place that you need to start, is saying
And we could put on the agenda, tear down the building. We could vote on that.
Put it on the agenda.
Yeah.
We have
I've run out of
a
paper.
belief that we are going to move forward with this. We will solve this problem for the town of Rockport, and we will come back to you with a proposal that you will be happy with.
That's autocratic.
It's autocratic, but it's also positive. And I think that's one of the things that's lacking. I know you guys wrote a letter to the editor supporting it. It was kind of weak, no offense. But it wasn't.
That's on me. I wrote it.
It didn't show the passion.
I did my
and
best.
The energy and the, this is gonna be great. Everybody look at it. Ask questions, come to the meetings. I think there has to be a certain amount of cheerleading going on. And I know that's not the role that the select board usually plays, but maybe in this instance it would be helpful. Just a thought.
For the record, I'm willing to put every attribute to a vote at our next meeting if you guys are willing to do it. I'm happy to get yelled at. I'm happy to get fired.
When you say attribute.
Everything, square
every
footage,
aspect of
budget,
square footage,
location, all of it. I'm happy to vote on it.
Okay.
If you guys are willing to put it on the agenda. I'll sit here for 5 hours of public
Right.
comment beforehand and get yelled at the whole time if we can vote on it.
Okay. What were those 4 that you had? You had 4.
Oh, he opened it up to everything. So
Okay.
every point, I mean, we had,
That's let's just
Yeah.
craft another proposal at the next
Okay.
meeting to be ready for the ballot. That's basically what that says.
Yeah.
I think that's
That's a bit
little too
fast.
much.
I
think.
figured you guys feel that way.
No, I think we need to gather,
because
have
it-
more strength in confidence in what we do from the voters and from the citizens.
well, it cuts short the education process that inclusion hopefully will provide.
I agree.
You're being percuffative again too yourself. What was that? Mispronunciation?
Okay.
All right.
I think, are we done? Are we adjourned?
This here workshop?
We're in a workshop, so we didn't come to a meeting and we didn't go to meetings.